All right. Oh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry to keep everyone waiting. This is the Election Subcommittee of Government Affairs. Appreciate everyone joining us today. We've got an agenda with about 3 bills on it. I'll ask Chairman LaHood to open us up with a prayer.
All right. Thank you. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for this day. Thank you for the folks here that have come to just advocate and show interest for what's going on in our state. I just pray that you give us wisdom today and clarity in the direction we should move, and just be with us as we go through this discussion. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chairman LaHood. All right. I'm going to go to the bottom of the agenda first and call Representative Chairman Petrie to present HB 48. I think we've got your mic on, Chairman Petrie, just when you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me well? Thank you, and members of the committee. I bring to you today what is a substitute House Bill 48, and this is a change. So let me first just frame the issue that I'm trying to get at, and then I'll explain a little bit of how we got here. You see a substitute that changes this dramatically from where it was. So let me put it like this. So we all live in a very hyper-partisan world today, right? We know that. I mean, we're politicians. That's the nature of the beast. We live in a world politically that is far more partisan than it used to be, without question. You talk to a lot of the folks that have been in this legislature for a long time, and you won't find one that doesn't agree with that. Well, why is that? Well, there's a multitude of reasons. We've got 24-hour media. We've got very ideological media on both sides. You know, you got media over here and media over here. It's 24 hours a day, and this is kind of the world we live in today. And that's okay. That's politics. But then we have some positions that really should be beyond politics. Our judges, fortunately, in our Constitution, our judges are nonpartisan, as they should be. I can't imagine anybody in this room thinks that our judges should not be nonpartisan. They should mete out justice fairly and impartially. It doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican. Your job is to hold people accountable for the law of the land, the law that we establish in this legislature. I think everybody agrees with that. So, unfortunately, our district attorneys in this state are partisan, okay? And in fact, they're partisan in statute. And it would require us to do something to change that. But in the world we live in today that I described earlier, what has happened is that every race now is politicized. In every race, quite frankly, we all know this, running here even in Georgia, every race is nationally politicized. There's issues going on the national level that we have to, hear from our constituents on 24/7. A lot of times there are things far beyond our control because they're national issues. But everything is so nationalized from what I described earlier. And so what has happened in recent years, I do not remember this in the past. Where I grew up, we've always had diverse DAs. Democrat, Republican, it didn't matter. They all were focused on doing their job and fulfilling their oath of office, which is simply to protect the community. Our district attorney is the chief law enforcement officer in our community. Their job is to enforce the laws of the land, those established by the legislature. But here's what's happened in recent years. Rhetoric on the right and the left, okay, and because we elect district attorneys in a partisan way, and we elect them accordingly on primary days, we either get ideologues on the left or ideologues on the right. And the race becomes politicized in such a way about measures that, quite frankly, have nothing to do with the role of a district attorney. Nothing. You know, some of the matters that are brought up during campaigns have nothing to do with the role of a district attorney. So having said all that, here's what I set out to do. I set out to make district attorney races. Again, doesn't matter if you're someone who's convicted of a crime. Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. If you're a victim of a crime, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. None of that matters. The district attorney, just like our judges, should just fairly prosecute the law of the land. So here's what I set out to do initially, simply to make all these races nonpartisan. But we've changed that because I don't think that was polling friends and others discovered that that probably wasn't going to work. So here's what your substitute does. If you look at this before you, Mr. Chairman, this is LC 472320S. And what this bill does very simply, I'll let you read it, but what it does very simply is allow a local jurisdiction through local legislation to choose if they themselves want a race to be nonpartisan for district attorney. We can't do that I had to learn from legislative counsel. We can't, and thanks to Representative Gaines over there who's helped me in this, we can't now do that because they're statutorily partisan. So this would allow local delegation to elect whether or not they choose for their DA to be partisan or nonpartisan, similar to what we do for county commissions, school boards, etc. That is very simply what this bill does, Mr. Chairman. If there's any questions, I'm glad to take them.
Thank you, Chairman Petrie. You do have some questions.
Sure.
I think Representative Saines down on the end there.
Thank you, Chairman Petrie, for bringing this bill. I would agree with you. Our district attorney system in this state is definitely needing attention. I know other colleagues of ours have brought this to attention. In terms of ideology and the way our primary structure works, I am, for example, was elected in a primary. Do you believe me to be an ideologue?
I don't believe you're an ideologue. Now, I know you quite well. You're my good friend. I do not believe that.
And I appreciate your listing the district attorneys as the chief law enforcement in a district. Sheriffs are also top law enforcement elected officials.
Correct.
Would you say that we should be looking at them as well for a nonpartisan race since they also have discretion?
I haven't addressed that, but in my opinion, again, they're the types of positions that I believe should be nonpartisan personally. That is correct.
And final question, what other offices do we allow a piecemealed approach to nonpartisanship in terms of elected offices currently?
I'm not sure about that. I think you've named them.
Okay.
Sheriffs and district attorneys.
In terms
Our
of
judges are already, now locals, there are local judges can be partisan. Constitutionally, our Superior Court judges, et cetera,
I believe it's Superior Court that we currently allow to utilize local legislation to make nonpartisan. Is that correct or no? Do we allow
they're nonpartisan constitutionally.
Yeah, sorry. Is there any offices we allow to go from partisan to nonpartisan through local legislation right now?
I don't know the answer to that. Representative Gaines, do you know the answer to that? Yeah.
Thank you.
There are, okay.
Any further follow-up, Chairman Saines? You're good. Okay, thank you. Representative Olalier.
Thank you, Chair. Chairman, I appreciate you bringing this to us, and I share your sentiments against the hotly partisan nature of our politics. However, I don't think that it's this body's responsibility to guard against partisanship. It is this body's responsibility to protect each woman and man's vote. And I do know that shifting the current election date from the general November election date to the primary May date would significantly decrease the number of constituents and voters who participate in the process of voting for two critical positions. And so how we feel about the partisan nature of elections is our opinion. I do think that the people should ultimately have the final say in deciding who they want to be representing them in those seats. And so the shift from November to May, in my opinion, would severely undercut the everyday person and voters' ability to vote on these two critical positions. And that's my big concern, and I'm not sure how we get around that.
I respect your position on that. I understand. One would hope, but here's what I would hope. I would hope that as we elect judges, that this would essentially, they'd be elected as our judges, and that people would be focused on the individual, the candidate, their experience, their ability to protect the community rather than politics. And yes, it would place it on a different election day. But I respect your good question and your position on that. I understand. I understand well what you're speaking.
Ask a quick follow-up, Chair. So are you saying that individuals currently aren't applying that reasoning and intentionality when considering who represents them in these seats?
Here's what I think. I think that the partisan nature, as I said earlier, of elections is driving voter turnout to individuals on issues far beyond protecting the community from crime. That is my position.
Thank you, Chairman.
That is my position. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for the good question, sir.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question. You said it would be brought by the local delegation in this House. Is that correct?
Yes, under this measure, the local delegation could make a determination themselves if they chose for their DA to be nonpartisan. Yes, ma'am. That's
Okay,
correct.
and so is there any protections against what we saw happening during redistricting, where when one party had the majority, or the minority party had the majority of the delegation, and then the majority party made it a general bill, and
Correct.
basically, didn't allow the voice of the majority to ring true?
This would, so yes, ma'am, that would be inappropriate, and I think what you're alluding to, if I understand your question, this does say on line 12, by local act. So it would have to be a local act.
May I?
And
do a follow-up?
Representative Gaines, if you need to, I'll allude, Mr. Chairman, if I can, to Representative Gaines, maybe here or there.
His
He's
light's
quite
flashing. I'm
knowledgeable
getting
of
to him
these
in a second.
affairs and has helped me on some of this. So, but my understanding, the language is pretty clear. It's a local act. Representative Gaines, do you agree? Yeah. Thank you. But very good question, Representative.
Well-
Thank you for it.
May I have a follow-up? So, in the history of the House, when we redistricted Cobb school or school boards, county commissions, they were always brought by local legislation. That was considered local, and then all of a sudden the rules changed, and so my fear is that is going to happen again, and I don't see anything that makes me feel like that's not possible. So maybe Representative Gaines can.
Yeah, I can't speak to that, Representative. I haven't been here. That I can only say, I know that in the history of redistricting, both sides have done all kind of things, and I can't speak to all of that. I can just be very forthright with you. I think it's a great question, the one that should be thoroughly vetted by this committee. I can only tell you that what I'm trying to do is to try to hope that we encourage, at least, the people have a right to elect whoever they choose. But I would hope that we could encourage at least candidates to run on what they're going to do to protect the public safety, rather than on all this, these issues that are just being politicized. So that's my goal. But very good questions, and I thank you for them.
Representative Gaines, Chairman Gaines, sorry.
I just wanted to ask and had a comment and question. Right now, in a lot of these DA races, to your point, they have become very partisan. In fact, we've seen a lot of out-of-state funding in a lot of these races. I know, we've seen, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and George Soros funded, money coming into a lot of these races. Do you think by making it nonpartisan in districts where the local acts were passed, would that help with some of this out-of-state money that is influencing these races and making offices that, to your point, probably should not be partisan? Would it help where those local acts were passed?
I think it would. Remember, it wouldn't. So yes, Representative, I think it would help. Here's what I would say, however. So there's nothing that would prohibit an organization from supporting somebody they believe supports their values, and this won't change that. It certainly won't change. Our judge, you can run for office in a nonpartisan race, and you can tell the world, I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. You can tell them whatever you want. You can tell them I'm a this or that or the other. I'm a libertarian. It doesn't matter to me. You can do all of that as you campaign. But I think that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is to focus on what this position is really all about. I mean, to me, it's not a political position, or it shouldn't be. But hey, I'm just one rep out of 180. But this is my position. But certainly want to make it clear this doesn't prohibit anybody from speaking, campaigning any way they choose. But it would be a nonpartisan race.
And as a follow-up, do you believe it's true that we've seen DAs and solicitors who've been elected that have chosen simply to just not enforce laws that they don't want to enforce?
Absolutely, and we're dealing with that in one of my. I represent 2 counties, one partisanship, one the other, and yes, absolute whole classes that are being ignored. That is correct, sir.
And do you think some of that is because of partisanship, where the individuals who are getting elected are running on a particular party platform, running so far to the left, and choosing just not to prosecute entire classes of crimes?
I believe that to be true, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Gaines. Representative Gullett.
Thank you, Chairman. And Chairman, thanks for bringing this bill. What branch of the government are judges in today, like Superior Court judges and Appellate Court and Supreme Court?
Say again.
What branch of government is the Supreme Court, Appellate Court, Superior Court?
That is the judicial branch.
Okay. And what branch of government is district attorneys?
Their executive branch, yes.
No, they're judicial branch.
The judicial
They are,
branch.
yeah.
Okay,
So
gotcha, yeah.
I think that's the clear distinction here. Sheriffs are actually executive branch, and executive and legislature are typically partisan races. Judicial is typically not, and I think that's a clear distinction of what we're trying, what you're trying to do here, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
And when you're judiciary, you're there to follow the law, to execute the law, to judge fairly, and I think that's exactly, how I see this bill playing out. And if this is something that your local delegation does not want, it's something that you don't sign off on. And if it's something that your delegation does want, this is a tool in your toolbox to make it happen. So I know a number of DAs support it, and I know a number of DAs who do not support it.
I've talked to quite a few that do.
It's a mixed bag.
Quite a few that don't.
And I live in a county that's a pretty stronghold of Republican, and my DA supports the measure. I know some Democrat DAs who support the measure, and a strong Democrat. I also know some strong Republican ones that don't support it, and strong Democrats that don't support it. So it's a mixed bag for sure. But it's something that's just another tool in the toolbox, and I appreciate you bringing the measure, and I look forward to helping you pass it.
Well, thank you, Representative. And again, I think here's what I've learned talking about it. I think almost everyone you speak to commonsensically knows it makes sense that these positions should be nonpartisan. They do. But everybody, listen, even in my own, I got a county, I represent Bryan County, that's probably 80% Republican. A lot of people like it that way, being partisan. I just don't think either side benefits by this. I don't, I think that there's a better way forward, and that's what we're here to talk about today. And I'm glad to have a hearing on it just to discuss it. I believe there's a better way forward for the benefit of all Georgians, and we'll see what the will of the body is.
Any follow-up, Representative Gullett? Okay, thank you. Representative Maynard?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the bill. I think that this is a little bit of comment and a little bit of question.
Sure.
Starting with a little bit of comment, in each district is so different, and oftentimes we assume that if we are voting for someone within our party, that they have the best interest for our community. And with the prosecutors being such an instrumental part of justice, there are definitely times when the prosecutors are not looking out for the best interest of the community. And the other comment I guess I would just like to make is, when you are prosecuting and you decide that you are not going to take certain crimes, you're not going to investigate certain crimes. Right now what's happening, police officers will investigate. Once they investigate, they will go to sometimes, instead of going to a judge to get a warrant for the arrest, they bypass the judge and they go straight to the DA, and they ask the DA, are you going to prosecute this? So right then and there, the DA has become the judge, the DA, and the jury. I think for school boards, the second part to this is school boards are nonpartisan in my district. And what that has led people to do in my district, with it being nonpartisan, it forces people to go and look and research the person. So when it comes to schools, this person supports this person doesn't support this, and it's not a Republican, Democrat. It's just, what issues do you support? And if we have DAs that say they're going to support crimes against women versus we're going to support raper defendants, if we're going to support that, then at least you know where they stand in a policy issue. And that is why I'm glad we're having the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. You point out some very, very good points. I agree.
Thank you, Representative Maynor. Representative Bazemore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I have to agree with my colleague, Representative Anole. I'm sorry. Thank you, Alalie. I knew I was going to mess it up. I'm so sorry. Phil, yes, Phil. No. That we should not be trying to govern the atmosphere and the individuals. And to my other colleague's point, I would ask that we put in this bill that this is strictly local, because to her point, what happened, local delegations, and it will not turn to a general bill, because that's exactly what we dealt with this last session. We thought we were dealing with the local delegation that was representing that area, and then when we turned around, the bill was changed into a general bill. So I understand what you're saying in here, and I appreciate that, but let's keep it that way, and let's be specific in this bill that it cannot be changed to a general bill.
Representative Bazemore, I appreciate your comments, and I would ask Legislative Council maybe to, if possible, Chairman, maybe could weigh in on that. I would be more than happy to do whatever would be necessary to codify, if the will was to move this in some way, that we could ensure that it would always be local legislation and not carried as a general bill. I understand well the questioning. I agree with you, and I would support that. I would support that. Whether we have it now or not, I don't know, Mr. Chairman. I mean, my understanding I described earlier on line 12.
Any follow-up, Representative Bazemore?
Thank you.
Well, I was, thank you. Well, I was going to just give my opinion, is it does say the General Assembly may provide by local act for the election in nonpartisan elections, et cetera, et cetera. So that would seem to me that protection is already included in the bill, but perhaps we could call on Legislative Council to see if my opinion's worth anything.
Or, Mr. Chairman, just to strengthen it in some way so that others would be more comfortable. I would be more than happy to support that.
Oh.
Well, I guess I would add to that is that, sorry. I was going to just say, the only thing that I guess I would add to that is just that, there are certain prohibitions against the legislature from prohibiting future acts of future legislatures. So, the law could, of course, could be, in theory, could be changed down the road, but that's all I was going to add to what you said.
So in other words, we could always change what is currently at that restriction, but as drafted, it has that restriction. Is that a fair statement?
Please, sir.
Okay, all right. Let me hit you up for one other question to Chairman Petrie's question. Do you view any other additional language that could be added to that provision to strengthen the protection that Representative Bazemore has expressed some concern about?
There may be, but frankly, I'd probably defer to Stuart, y'all's your regular attorney, when he gets here, because he should be here anytime, and this is an area he works on all the time, if that's feasible.
Okay, all right. Well, we may just hit him with that question when he walks in the door.
Helpful comments, Chairman. It helps, helps me to hear this.
What order? Representative Maynor.
Thank you, Chair. You know, what happened last year, at least one instance, there were several instances that my colleagues are talking about, but when it comes to the census that we do every 10 years, there was one particular county that did not give the information that they needed to the state in a timely manner, which meant a bill had to be a general bill. Otherwise, people would have been voting on 2010 census data. And so if we were to change something, I would agree to it that, you know, I don't know if the language could say something to the fact of it will always be a local bill unless it is damaging to such said body. Because in that one particular case, if the local legislation did not go forward as a general bill, then people would have been voting on 2010 maps.
Okay. I trust the representative understand. I was not a member of this committee and to deal with those, or the committee that dealt with those affairs, but understand well your concern, and I would hope that we could address that as we address the previous question as well. Glad to have all of that considered, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any follow-up,
thank you,
Representative Maynor?
No, thank you.
Let's see. Yeah, Treasurer Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there were multiple bills that I was referring to other than the one Rep. Maynor just referred to. There was Cobb School Board, there was Gwinnett, there were commission maps. So there were many that it got turned into a general bill. So I would make the suggestion that we just put the General Assembly may provide only by local act as a way to solve that.
Again, Representative,
Thank you.
again, I would be more than happy to support that. I think everyone here understands what I'm trying to do, trying to allow, if the locals choose to, because we can't, I think we agree we're not going to mandate it. If the locals agree that they'd like their DA to be nonpartisan, we're trying to find a path forward for them to do that. I would be more than happy to support what you just described, if indeed Legislative Council believed that would solve solve your problem to make sure you don't have this concern.
Any follow-up? Representative Roberts?
Oh, I'm done. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, so do we have any further questions for the sponsor? I don't see any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Petrie. Do we have anyone here to testify on this bill? I don't believe we have anyone on the list. Does anyone wish to be heard on the bill? All right. All right, so what is the pleasure of the committee?
Second.
I got a motion and a second to do pass. Any discussion? There was no one signed up. So. All right, Representative Roberts.
I believe we may have a conflict with our House rules also right now that all bills that change partisanship are general bills according to our House rules.
Well, this is a
So-
general bill.
Well, but I'm saying it couldn't be a local bill if somebody brought the bill. If a local delegation brought the bill, is that in conflict?
Well, I would assume if the General Assembly were to vote the bill out, that would effectively change the rule.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, if I may, that it wasn't mentioned by Legislative Counsel, which was Stuart Morelli. I'm not aware of that, but I respect the lady's position and opinion.
Representative Roberts, do you have any response? All right. Representative Saines.
Don't we currently have local bills that change partisanship with school boards? So it's not something we aren't currently doing.
That would be my understanding.
We've,
But I,
Representative, we've done
I
it
may
in-
not have the
in
same
my
degree of
county, we've done it for
expertise in
school
the
boards,
rules
et
of the
cetera.
House as
Yeah.
Representative Roberts does. I'm sorry, Chairman Petrie, I was talking over you. What'd you
No,
say?
I was talking over you, Chairman. I apologize.
But what was your comment? I'm sorry.
No, sir, I was speaking to Representative Saines' comment that I know personally in our county, we've changed partisanship in school boards in the past.
Okay.
I know well. I can't speak to anything outside of that region.
All right, so I've got a motion and a second. Was there any motion from the amendment? Does anyone wish to make that motion? All right, I don't hear one. All right, so we've got,
The amendment that Representative Roberts made?
yes, she proposed adding only to line 12.
Yeah. Support that.
There's not been a motion made for that, so. All right, so we've got a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? We've got, is that Representative Fleming?
Yes, sir. What's the difference between provided by a local act and provided by only local act? I think the word only is superfluous there.
Well, I suppose there was a concern that there was some emphasis to it, but I don't believe that motion has been made, so is there any?
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I thought it was before, so I was commenting on the motion.
Yeah, I don't
My
believe that's
bad.
been made, so I'd like to, I think at this point, if there's any other discussion on the motion that's on the floor, that is to pass. Representative Maynard?
For the good of the body, I propose to use Representative Roberts' amendment of putting the word only.
All right, so there's a motion to insert the word only after provide on line 12. Is that your motion? Okay, so we have a motion to amend. I have a second. Any discussion? All right, all right, who's that down there? Representative Chairman Saines. Sorry, Chairman Saines.
I'll just comment that I would agree with Representative Fleming that it doesn't seem necessary to add.
I would agree with you, but I'm going to allow the motion. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion to amend signify by saying aye. 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 All right, I think, I'll tell you what, let's do a show of hands. All right, I've got 3 in favor. All right. You try not to coach the electors down there. All right, so we have 4 in favor. All right, let's those opposed, same sign. Please just show your hands. All right, the motion fails. That was the motion to amend. Now let's go back to the motion. The main motion is to pass substitute LC 472320S. I think we've had plenty of discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. No. All right, let's show hands. All those in favor, raise your hand. All right, and all those opposed? Okay. All right, so the motion carries. So the bill is on to the whole committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to everyone for the good questions.
All right, let's see. All right, I believe our next bill, Chairman Blackman, if you're back, would you like to be heard on your bill? You didn't anticipate how long I would be able to take to get to you. So. Yeah, well, from wherever you like. If you want to just, whichever's your preference. You want to stay where you are? Or you want to try the podium? All right, let's do that.
You'll allow me to do.
That'll be fine. Why don't you now? I think we've heard your bill previously, so it's coming back.
Yeah, yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
But why don't you remind us what your bill is about and tell us a little bit about it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bring before the committee House Bill 426. Just a little bit of history and a few points, and then with the substitute that you have before you, 472328S, I will try to be brief. We've certainly been working on this a couple of years and trying to get it into a format that is wholly acceptable, if at all possible, But in House Bill 316 several years ago, we created this paper backup as it relates to the ballots. And then we provided open records and public record for these ballot images, and then an additional layer of transparency, accountability, and verification would open up those ballots for the actual physical ballot for public inspection. That's if there are any kind of apparent issues or concerns or discrepancies regarding these images. So again, a few points. I think that, obviously, citizen-run elections are an essential element of self-governance. Ballots, are certainly meant to be voted in secret, not counted in secret. And the court seal that's referred to is what is in this language that we eliminate, not a protective, nothing that would protect the ballots in any way. So what has been added is a couple of additional guardrails and suggestions that have put forward by either other members or other people, interested parties. If you look on line 100, it kind of speaks to what and when the ballots may be inspected. And then on lines 134, some language is added as to who may handle the ballots, physically handle the ballots. And that is part of the State Election Board's rules and regs that are required within 90 days of the effective date of the bill. Try to answer any questions best I can, and continue to take suggestions in the hopes that we can get to some language that would allow citizen oversight of these regarding the verification and some additional transparency on the voting process.
Thank you, Chairman Blackman. Were the provisions you mentioned, were those in the is this a new sub or is this the same as the
This
one?
is, you have a substitute that I mentioned before, 472328S, and those are some additional language than the substitute we talked about at the last hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. And I'm sorry, which line specific? I saw that you were, I caught up with you at 134 to 136. What was the other?
100 to 103 on page 5, it basically says what may be inspected and when it may be. That speaks to those two questions.
Was clarifying the issue of what documents, I suppose.
Yes,
that was discussed last time. Okay. All right,
I think the intent is not to allow anything that would be, software related. And I think there's some old language that may be a little bit confusing regarding, software.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Any questions for Chairman Blackman? Representative Olalier.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate you coming before us again, Chairman. I asked this question last week. I'll ask it again. If the digital copies are already available to the public, why would we need to bypass the court seal to provide physical documents to in everyday Georgia?
Well, I mean, again, I don't necessarily believe that since there aren't any identifying marks on the ballots that we were meant to, have government come in and say, we've counted these, this is what we found to be the case, and nothing further be allowed beyond that unless you go back to a government entity, the judicial system, in order to get any kind of additional review on discrepancies. I think what we're looking at is if you look at these images that are provided and you have them accessed via open record and you find some inconsistencies or discrepancies of question, that the physical ballots may be looked at in those instances. Again, not meant to be a weapon in any way or to be abused, but just available to the public for review.
Can I ask a follow-up, Chairman? Chairman, we also talked about, and we just had a very long, drawn-out conversation about partisanship. And in the climate we currently live in, removing that court seal, which is the only barrier against sham audits and endless amounts of ballot challenges, removing that court seal increases the possibility, would you say, of bogus challenges, tens of thousands of ballots being challenged that could that could and would inundate local officials with the task of working through those.
Well, oh, I'm sorry.
No, like would the removal of the court seal increase the potential of sham audits or decrease the potential?
I
Of sham
think the
audits?
states where this is, ballots are subject to open records in this kind of case have not seen that kind of issue or problem. I'm not sure that I could answer one way or the other where that could become a problem. This is not intended to cause or promulgate any kind of issue along those lines. This is just meant to, again, say that, our elections are citizen run, and that the ultimate transparency and verification lies with our citizens and not with government.
Quick follow-up. You mentioned not seeing it. Is it possible that the presence and existence of a court seal is why we haven't seen a large volume of sham audits or inquiries?
Well, I don't know that I could speak to that, Mr. Representative. I mean, that's a fair question.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions for the sponsor? And by the way, it's been pointed out to me that we are starting to get a little long on time for Chairman Anderson, so I do want to keep things moving. I don't see that you have any other questions, but we do have some witnesses who wish to be heard. Let's see. Tamara Favorito. That's fine with me. I'm not going to keep the man from that. Yeah.
I'm Tamara Favorito with Voter GA, which has led the election integrity movement here in Georgia since 2006. And we have over 20,000 followers. And I'd like for you to know that our many leaders around the state support this bill. Unsealing the ballots is the single most important action the legislature can take. And I'd like to address Representative Alalie's questions about I got it right. Why are ballot images not enough? We answered that question for you and submitted a document into the record when we met last as to all the problems with the ballot images that were retained in the Fulton County audit. If you could take a look at that, and we can meet with you if you'd like to know more about it. Your comment about sham audits, in this bill, it does not speak to audits at all. It makes ballots subject to open records requests. And once the request has been made, then a reasonable charge can be assessed to the requester. There can be an electronic copy of the original ballots made available to multiple requesters. We also believe that in general, election-related ORRs will actually go down because right now, because we can't see the ballots, we are requesting every document known to man to try to figure out what's going on. So we believe that burden will go down on the election offices. The only concern I have with this bill is still the giving the state election board the right to make the rules. If we could change that to may make the rules that the ballots are made public or in accordance with current open records request law, because our concern is, what if they just don't come up with the rules? And that has happened in the past. We have to make a way for the ballots to be made public. But thank you so much for considering this. We think it is a good bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Any questions of this witness? Representative, okay, all right. Thank you so much, Ms. Favorito. Todd Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Todd Edwards with the Association of Counties Commissioners of Georgia. I'll abbreviate my comments since I was allowed the testimony before this committee before on this same bill. Why do we have sealed ballots or this group going to the clerk following elections or kept by the election offices? It's because we're required to keep them in case there's a need for an audit or a lawsuit. We prefer that they stay sealed for numerous reasons. This legislation, as stated before, would unseal them. It acts as a safety net for everyone involved, including concerned citizen groups or those who call into question the results of an election. And it also ensures that no one can accuse election officials of tampering with the ballots. The question was asked, or the statement was meant earlier, is that it is not meant to be a weapon or abused, and I 100% agree with that. I don't believe that's the intentions of the bill. However, I do feel that that's what's likely to result should this legislation pass. Following last year's the 2022 election, and this is actually between the election and the certification, counties received over 1,000 open records requests. One of them seek to have a copy of every scanned copy of the actual ballots to the Republican primary election. Another one was 159 counties for the election report, the cast vote record history prior to the primary. We had another one challenging all the eligibility of voters on the county registrars, go through most of the counties in Georgia. The list goes on. One statewide, or this was nationwide, was a request that every ballot be disclosed, its sequential ID, its timestamp, its method of voting, for example, in person, mail-in, provisional. This was not only for that election, but for 2015 through 2021, and the list continues. There are lots of groups out there that call into question the validity of Georgia elections. That's fair, but ultimately we hope that the courts, through these sealed ballots, and attorneys are able to make that determination. I know it's a great interest to several groups to get a hold of these actual ballots. I would say through the passage of Senate Bill 2002 a few years ago, the scanned images are open to open records, or subject to open records. We agreed to that. We're happy to provide it. If they're not legible, perhaps we would respectfully submit to the General Assembly to increase the resolution, or somehow work on that to make that suffice to meet these requests, but keep these ballots sealed. We need them to remain sealed. We've enjoyed, I understand the bill's been made better. I'm sorry I've not seen the substitute. Should it progress through this committee and move forward, we hope to continue working with them. But I did want to go on record sharing these grave concerns from the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. We always appreciate your testimony. Are there any questions for Mr. Edwards? All right, you don't seem to have any. Thank you. Garland Favorito. I would say you're the 1-2 and the 1-2 punch.
Let's hope I can hit a grand slam. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I want to thank Chairman Blackman for this bill. It's just a tremendous, it's a tremendous benefit for honest and transparent elections. Wanted to just address some of Mr. Edwards' points. I think Tamara has already addressed that. If the ballots are public record, all those ORRs that he just talked about are going to be reduced. You're not going to have the kind of ORRs that we also already had. The ballot images, the reason why images are enough, I'm going to repeat this one more time. I don't think Mr. Edwards heard it, but I submitted testimony last time. This was my sworn testimony in Fulton County Superior Court, that the Fulton County election results, the ballot images, were electronically altered prior to the certification of the 2020 results. There was a wholesale replacement of the ballot images we found after Senate Bill 202 was made into law, and therefore ballot images will never suffice. You have to have access to the real ballots. So we tried to do that. We had a court case that it took 2 years. We had 4 sworn affidavits that there were counterfeit ballots in the Fulton County audit, and we were unable to see the ballots for 2 years. Finally, the Georgia Supreme Court overrode lower court decisions and told us that we really did have standing, which is what we knew all along. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I just want to I think Representative Maynard summed it up the best. We have to err on the side of the citizens. This is not about election officials. Election officials work for the people. I work for the people as a volunteer, and y'all work for the people, and that's why we need this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing it, and thank you, Chairman Blackman, for giving us the opportunity to see ballots.
Thank you, Ms. Favorite. I think you may have a question, Representative Maynard.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You just said that we have to see the original ballot, and the previous presenter said that an electronic version of the ballot was okay. So what do you consider is the electronic version considered the original ballot?
Yes, ma'am. No, so the ballot image is an electronic copy of the original ballot. Currently, the Dominion voting system can only copy that ballot at a 200 DPI rate, which is not adequate to detect counterfeits, and it may not even be adequate to verify the electronic results. This is why we need to have these ballots public record. So that's the reason why the ballot images are not adequate. In addition, as I mentioned, they were electronically altered. We discovered that. And if you read the document that we submitted last time, we didn't just prove this one way. We proved it 12 different ways. There was a wholesale replacement of the electronic ballot images prior to certification. And the only way you'll ever find out what the truth of the election is to see the actual physical ballots. And that's why we're trying to do that.
Follow up, Chair. So the previous speaker, who's referencing the same data, she mentioned how it wouldn't be a great cost to counties because it's an electronic digital copy that they could give to multiple people.
That's right.
But you're saying it has to be the original ballot, and she's saying a digital
I'm
copy.
sorry. I understand your question. What she's saying, yes, we could copy the original ballots. So the current image that Dominion produces is a 200 DPI image. It's not adequate for detecting counterfeits or really even verifying the results. What Tamara was proposing is to allow the elections officials to make a 600 DPI copy of the ballots. That would suffice. So we could get a real copy of the real ballots, and then we would be able to have some assurance that as long as that copy was produced independently of the Dominion voting system, and that's what we're looking for. And then that would reduce the effort by the elections officials for fulfilling those open records requests.
And Mr. Chair, if you could just allow me one last question.
Try to make it quick.
Follow up. So if the election board made the copy, you're going to be looking at a copy. It's not going to be the original ballot still. And so there's still going to be question for if this copy was altered in some way. And that's just my final comment.
Yes, ma'am. So no, these are great points. Thank you for asking. So in order to make that copy, the records have to be unsealed. And that's the significance of Chairman Blackman's bill. Once they're unsealed, then they can make an independent 600 DPI copy. Right now, they're just giving us the Dominion voting system images, which we have proven were electronically altered at least one case. So that would, I'm not sure, did I address your question properly? Okay, thank you. And thank you for your support. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Ms. Favorito, we got one more question from Representative Lallier.
Mr. Favorito, you mentioned we proved those irregularities with the ballots you mentioned.
Yes.
Who proved? You or the courts?
Well, again, that was my sworn testimony in Fulton County Superior Court, which was unrefuted by Fulton County attorneys. So technically, you might say that's not proving it, but there was no attorney in Fulton County willing to challenge me on what I just testified to you to.
And that distinction matters because I don't question your integrity, your expertise. The reason why the court seal exists is to remove that bias that we all would bring as individuals to the table and put forth a process to seriously vet founded claims and questions as it relates to ballots. So, but I do think it's important to be clear on the who, because we do have a process that you or anyone can use if there are questions regarding ballots. There is a process that they can avail of currently.
Well, so just to clarify, House Bill 426 basically provides the intent of the legal seal. by making sure that the ballots cannot be altered, damaged, destroyed, removed, or whatever the code section is. So that gives you the intent of the seal without keeping the ballot secret from the people of the state of Georgia. So you achieve the intent of the seal, but then you eliminate what's happening now, which we're conducting secretly counted elections, as Chairman Blackman has alluded to. And the seal has no purpose as long as you have this code in to ensure that those ballots are still protected and under the custody of the elections officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Favorito. All right. Vasu, is it Abhiraman?
Thank you, Chair. Esteemed members of the committee, my name is Vasu Abhiraman. I'm Senior Policy Counsel with the ACLU of Georgia. I'm also a proud elections worker. I've worked over a dozen elections in these past 3 years at many different capacities and served as a volunteer deputy registrar. I kind of want to speak for folks who work in our election system here. For example, if you look at our big 4 counties in Georgia, Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Gwinnett, once Janine Eveler retires from Cobb in a couple of months, all 4 of these offices are going to have new directors who did not serve in the 2020 election. This system has seen an extraordinary amount of takeover, and many important vacancies exist across this state. The North Star for elections policymaking right now, it should be either 1, it improves the voter experience, or 2, it improves the lives and experience of our local elections officials. I don't believe this bill fits into that, and that's why we at the ACLU of Georgia oppose this bill. I think a drop of common sense might be needed here. Do we really think the people who have spoke out in support of this bill are going to look at these ballots and say, oh, we saw these ballots, they're not counterfeit, they're great? We know what's going to happen here, okay? So let's be grounded in the reality of this system and in understanding what's happening. I used to be a former software engineer. I've read some of these claims, the technicals in them. They're like an episode of 24 where just a bunch of technical claims are thrown out and then some hacking happens, and there's nothing to it. From me reading these documents myself and trying to go through the technicals of this system myself, I pride myself on trying to learn the technicals of this system. If this bill were to move forward, we have some suggestions. First, I believe lines 98, it says 97 and 98. It says such ballots and other documents shall be retained and preserved in the office of the clerk, county records manager, and then it says or officer designated by the clerk. I think we should cross out or officer designated by the clerk because I believe in many counties around our state, there are 159 after all, that could be someone at the elections office. And I really think we should leave the elections office out of this. So have a strong recommendation to cross that out. If you look at lines 101 and 102, it says subject to inspection after initial certification by the superintendent. So right now that happens the Monday after election day, and state certification has a deadline of the next Friday, so Friday of the next week. We would strongly prefer that it say after certification by the state of Georgia so that it's only inspected after that final certification. Again, I think we all know, if we're grounded in reality here, what will happen in between the county certification and the state certification if folks are looking at these ballots and claiming they saw counterfeits and things like that. Okay, so let's try to have it after state certification. Lastly, have a suggestion to include language that would protect electors' personally identifiable information that may be contained with the ballot. The outer envelopes of absentee ballots, that's of primary concern here. I believe there may be some language in the code already that tries to ensure that protection, but I believe in this section it would be absolutely warranted. Have other suggestions as well to improve this bill, maybe limiting these requests to residents of the county the same way we limit challenges to residents of the county, to limit the potential number of requests the same party can file, the number and kinds of ballots subject to be inspected at any given time. Again, these are things that would help local elections officials, common sense rules around the process. But again, given that this bill does not cognizably improve the voter experience or the lives of local elections officials, we cannot support it. Okay. Yield for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Chairman Blackman.
We've had several discussions, and I appreciate your opinion on it. But did you ever find any other states where the problems that you suggest will happen, have happened?
Yeah,
that have this particular legislation.
So
or
I think
this in law.
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking that question. First, Georgia is the 8th largest state in our nation. I'm not all that interested in what's happening in states that are smaller than Georgia.
Well,
it has
Florida's larger, and they allow public inspection, as I understand it.
Okay, I mean, I need to look into that. I haven't looked at what happens in Florida.
Okay.
Georgia is arguably the largest presidential swing state right now, according to the folks who look at this data. It has 159 counties, much more than Florida, second only to Texas. I think there are many things that distinguish Georgia and what's happened in Georgia right now. Florida did not send 2 election workers to the January 6th committee to talk about how their lives have been upended by the conspiracy theorists who are being appeased by this bill. So I think this bill does not make the lives of these folks better.
All right, thank you. Any further questions of this witness? I don't see any. Thank you very much for your testimony. Nope, thank you. Cut myself off, didn't I? All right, so any, I guess we've heard from the sponsor and we've heard from the witnesses. Does anyone want to make a motion? What's the pleasure of the committee? Got a motion to pass from Vice Chairman Gaines. Do I have a second? Second? So I have a motion and a second. Yeah, don't hit yourself with your mic there, Chairman. Any further discussion? I have a motion, a second on the floor. I don't hear any further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign? No. All right, let's do the hands again. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got 5. I think it's a 5. All opposed? 6. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. 6 to 4. So the motion carries. All right.
Thank you to the committee members.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, everybody. Chairman LaHood, if you wouldn't mind tagging. Oh, Houston is. All right. Vice Chairman Gaines, I've got to go present a bill, which I'm hopefully not late for.
All right, we will move on into House Bill 559. Representative Draper, if you want to come on forward and present your bill.
All right, good afternoon, colleagues. I know it's been a long day. Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity to present my bill, House Bill 559, to you today. Let me start by telling you what this bill does. So it takes the wait time guessing game out of voting for people who have babies and toddlers, right? So if passed, it would allow voters who are accompanied by a child who is 5 or under to go to the front of the voting line if they need to do that. So this is something that we already do for our voters who are elderly or disabled. And it makes good sense to offer the same support to those who are tasked with taking care of our youngest future voters. So House Bill 559 enjoys bipartisan support because at the end of the day, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, we all know how tough it is to keep a toddler still or to keep a baby from crying. I am a mother. I have 3 small children, and they are my inspiration for this bill. When I go to vote, I take my kids with me. Sometimes that is because I have to, right? But other times but it's always because I want to instill in them from a young age the importance of civic responsibility and participation. And generally when I go to vote, I get in and out relatively quickly. But last December, I stood in line with my kids for almost 2 hours. It was chilly. They were bored. They wanted to run around, but they couldn't because we were next to a parking lot. My kids who are not shy started talking with everybody in line about Paw Patrol, whether those people wanted to or not. And by the end of my experience, I thought to myself two things. I wish I could go to the front of the line, and two, I know everybody around me wished that I could have gone to the front of the line. All right. So in all seriousness, I think this bill is going to give folks the flexibility and predictability that they need to go out and vote in a time of life when flexibility and predictability are really needed. So we already have a law on the books that requires employers to give reasonable time off to their employees to exercise their right to vote. But the thing about parenthood is you never get time off. So let's help families be heard at the voting booth. And I ask for your vote in support of this bill, and I would love to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Representative. Do any
Sure.
members of the committee have any questions? Seeing none, we do have one individual signed up to speak to the bill, and we will go ahead and hear from Vasu Abhiraman. Did I get that right? If you would keep it brief, as we are up
Sure.
on a real tight time frame.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it very brief. This is the kind of bill that should be considered by this committee, in stark contrast to the last bill. Feel-good measure, helps the voter experience. Again, make this your North Star. Does it help the voter experience, or does it help local elections officials? If it doesn't, please don't consider it. This is a great bill. Please pass it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members of the committee have any comments? Number 14.
Thank you, Chair. No question, just a quick comment, and I want to thank Representative Draper for bringing this bill to our committee. As a father with a son who has stood in line for hours plus while my son is crying and fidgeting. This past November, he had an accident, and you mentioned it's not so much about the voter himself and the child wanting to get to the front, but everyone else wanting me to get to the front and out the door. Had an accident, and we pretty much had to hold him and carry him through the entire process. And so appreciate the benefit and relief that this provides parents and families who mainly have to take time off of their busy schedules to vote. So thank you again, Representative Draper.
It's a creative way for social distancing.
Thank you, Representative. Number 15, Representative Bazemore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleague, Representative Draper. And I appreciate you bringing this bill, and I think the experience that parents will have will be much, much better once we pass this piece of legislation. And their children will have a better experience also, and remember why they go to vote, that they can go to vote, and that it's an easy process. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing we have no other further comments, what is the will of the committee? We have a move to pass and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Good point, Representative Gullett. Discussion, Representative Gullett.
Thank you. Yeah, so I know we had got reached, some of the sponsors, I'm happy to be a sponsor of this bill, got reached out to by what I think is a legitimate concern for the way that the wording of some of the wording of the bill, and I have an amendment at the appropriate time, a friendly amendment.
We do have a motion and a second on the original underlying bill, so now would be the appropriate time to offer an amendment.
Okay, so on line 14, where it says "and requires assistance," I'm looking to strike out "and requires assistance" in casting an absentee ballot in person at the registrar's office, absentee ballot clerk's office, or other locations as provided in Code Section 21-382. So the new language would be, "who is disabled shall upon request to." And then line 30, striking out where it says "and requires assistance in voting as authorized by Code Section 21-409. So it would say, or who is disabled shall upon request. And this was discussed with the author. Again, a friendly amendment.
Is there a second on the amendment? So we have a motion, a second to amend the bill. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing no discussion on the amendment, all those in favor of the Gullett amendment, please please signify by saying aye. All those opposed to the amendment, please signify by saying no. Hearing none, the amendment has passed. And so now we will go to the underlying bill, House Bill 559, as amended with the Gullett amendment included. All those in favor, any further discussion on the legislation? Seeing none, all those in favor of passage of House Bill 559 as amended, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by stating no. Your bill's passed. Congratulations.
My thanks to the committee.
On to the full committee. And this meeting stands adjourned.
Okay, the state and local subcommittee will be starting in just a very few minutes. We have a sign-up sheet on the table to my right, your left over here. If anybody wishes to speak to any of the three bills that are being discussed today, if you'll give us just another minute, we'll be ready in just a few minutes. All right, if I could have everyone's attention, let's get ready. We'll get the House Governmental Affairs, State and Local Government Subcommittee is now called to order. I want to ask Chairman Lumsden if he will open us in a quick prayer.
If you would, bow with me, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love and your goodness to us, for watching over us and caring for us. We thank you, Lord, for the time that you allow us to be here to do this. We thank you for the opportunity you've given to us for service. We ask that you would give us your wisdom and your guidance, and that we might have the will to do it as we understand it. We pray this in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, we're going to get right into this. We have three bills that we're going to be discussing today. The first one we're going to take up is House Bill 374. Representative Thomas, this is a
It's a House Bill 374, LC number 472287S. So I know we have a couple bills in committee today, so I've already had a hearing on this bill. I'm going to make this very short. This is a very slimmed down version of the bill I presented last week in subcommittee. We reduced the number of pages from 20 pages to 5 pages. This was done in an attempt to find some compromise, although I can't say necessarily successfully, language with GMA. But what we did is completely remove the 60% method for annexation or de-annexation from the bill. So, the 60% method, it's very complicated. You'll actually, for those of you that were here, you'd note that almost every single comment, minus maybe one, had to do with the 60% method. So it's gone. So I'm calling this a substitute de-annexation light. It still encompasses two of the biggest fundamentals of government accountability and transparency, but it really just makes a very narrow application. Specifically, it allows a citizen an alternative method to de-annexation through application via their county government. As the current process works, you have to apply to be annexed into a city, and then if you're not happy with the services or you're not feeling like you're getting what you pay for in your taxes, you would then have to go back to the city to apply to be de-annexed. So many times once you're in, you're in. A citizen who's not getting what they're promised but still forced to pay these taxes really has no other recourse available to them other than an act of General Assembly. And specifically, once this denial by the municipal government, I think we all know that acts of the General Assembly for de-annexation is extremely difficult. I'd like to also remind you that the city resident is still a county resident, and the county will still have to provide these services in the city's absence. And that was one of the reasons why we felt it was important to make sure that the county provided notice to I'm sorry, actually, I'm trying to find the specific line on it. But regardless, because I'm trying to keep this short, the city has to provide notification as well that they're good with it. So I think the big thing is by having a hearing through the county, it allows for a neutral, local, and elected officials to hear a request for de-annexation. The other thing I want to do real quick is just address some points that were brought up previously about this bill. The method only applies to parcels located at the boundary of a city, and they must have the same contiguity requirements that they would have versus annexation, such as at 50 feet. They have to touch the border of the city 50 feet. It does not remove the current process of de-annexation by the Act of the General Assembly or the municipal government. This process is still available to these people if they choose to use this. It's just nothing more than an alternative option. It would require 100%, okay, 100%, every single resident to agree to de-annex prior to the application to the county. That would be almost impossible to get a large sum of people that would agree to de-annex. So the potential impacts to the city are small in scope and really negligible in impact. Again, the bill addresses bonded indebtedness, requiring bonds issued on property to still be paid for by those who are wishing to de-annex. And one other thing I hear a lot is about spoke de-annexations. I don't know if many of you have seen the shapes of many of the cities surrounding, especially Metro Atlanta, but many times they have long tentacles that reach out for many miles, far beyond their city centers. I actually tried to address the tentacle thing in another bill, but we'll not deal with that today. But I would say that's probably reciprocal. So at that point, I will ask any questions, and if there's none, then I'd be happy to take a seat.
Representative Thomas, we do have one question. Representative Burnell?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a set amount of time they have to have lived in the city before they decide they want to de-annex?
2 years.
2 years, okay. Is that in the bill?
It's the standard for the, this was something that we actually deal with in the the Annexation Study Committee. I believe we changed it to 2 years, and Victor, I know you chaired that, but it was mirrored to that language, right? Was it 2 years?
I hadn't. Mr. Edwards, we'll let Mr. Edwards address that when he comes to the podium in just a few minutes.
I'll get you an answer. Yeah.
Any other questions on the part of the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We'll have, okay. Okay, first person on our sign-up sheet is Mark, is it Beechuk? Okay, that may have been carryover. We had a few carryovers from the last meeting, so we're just trying to make, okay. And this, Sarita Dyer? Okay. Okay. Okay, and what I'll do in the interest of time, if it's okay, I'll have the both the representatives signed up from GMA, Noah and Jim Thornton, to come up to the front together. Is that okay, or? So, Mr. Chairman, I think Rushi is going to speak. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Rushi, podium is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rushi Patel with GMA, and I'll be quick. We expressed a lot of our concerns at the last hearing for this bill. We really appreciate Representative Thomas meeting with us for extended time, and he addressed a large number of those concerns by getting rid of the 60% method part of the bill. That caused a lot of consternation among our members. We do still think that there are things that could be room for improvement in the bill, but we do think we can work with the author in improving this bill. We do still have concerns, but we just wanted to express that we are working with the author, and we think that we can continue to work with him.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Mr. Thornton, did you wish to address the committee also?
No, Mr. Chairman. I think we're signed up on 514.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That was it.
To answer your question, line items at line 83 through 85. It has to do, this is the kind of reciprocal of the annexation, so it can't be de-annexed. A property that has been de-annexed for municipality shall not be again annexed for at least 2 calendar years. So, and I believe I would have to get the language on the annexation, but I believe that is the mirror to the annexation language. So I just wanted to address your question. But no further questions, then I will leave it to the decision of the committee.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. We do have an additional sign up, and that's Representative David Wilkerson.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll also be brief. I just wanted to thank the author and GMA and ACCG for working together in our home county, in my home county of Cobb County. The way we create cities, I'll be brief again, but the way we create cities basically is we come in the legislative body, we create a map, and then we push it out to the community and let them voice their opinions. We actually have some neighborhoods that have 100% that say they don't want to be in a city, and they're at the top end. And just fixing those 12 homes or another neighborhood of 15 homes, this would provide them a lot of help. And so I just thank the author for doing this. I would love the 60%, but I think 100% basically gives somebody that it's no longer treated, the city's no longer treated like Hotel California, that once you get in, you never leave. And I think it's important that we give people that option, because people buy property for a reason. And so we don't want people moving in and then taking over a neighborhood, to your point. But we strongly encourage, I have thousands of people that would appreciate your favorable consideration of this bill. Thank you. And I'll take any questions if you have any.
Okay, any questions of the speaker?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And unfortunately, Chairman Leverett has left the room, or he could probably counter your Eagles reference with something else. I'm not that quick. Do we have anyone else who wishes to speak to 374? All right, seeing none, we're in a posture to entertain a motion on the part of the committee. We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the do pass motion on House Bill 374, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Representative Thomas. All right, we're going to move on to the next bill on our list, and we'll ask Representative Washburn to come to the podium. Representative Washburn has two bills before us today. We're going to take these one at a time. The first one we're going to discuss is House Bill 514, and the podium is yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the hearing today. We are looking at House Bill 514, which is LC 472267. Before I get into the bill, Mr. Chairman, with your blessing, I'd like to make just a couple of preliminary comments about this process that has produced both of these
Yes,
bills. I was honored to chair a study committee last summer titled the Study Committee on Regulation, Affordability, and Accessibility to Housing. What came out of that study committee was a lot of things, but two or three things that should be mentioned because they pertain to these two bills is, first of all, there's definitely a shortage of housing in Georgia. We are way behind on our housing supply, and so there's definitely a shortage. Second fact that came out is prices are very high, and you didn't need a study committee to tell you that. If you've observed that at all, you know that that is the case. The last thing that came out is very significant, and that is that many presenters testified to us that government regulation is now overly restrictive on housing production. And there was a strong opinion that prices are increased because of that, and that supply is affected because of that. And that came out of the study committee. The last thing I'd like to mention that came out of the study committee was a very impressive testimony from retired Chief Justice Harold Melton, in which he testified that the Georgia legislature has the authority and the power to pass legislation to address these issues, and I thought that was significant. In this process, I met with ACCG and GMA at my invitation. They came to my office, and we had a very nice meeting and a nice talk. We didn't agree on everything, but that's okay. People of goodwill can disagree, of course. I'm giving you this little bit of background to let you know that we made an attempt to have input from them. They ultimately sent us some recommendations. It took a while to get them, but we did finally get them. And their recommendations, from my reading of them, basically call for more local control, call for more state involvement, more state bureaucracy, and for more state money to be spent to incentivize housing. I'm giving you that background to let you know the reason this legislation has come forth. So let's go to it. I would point out to you that both these bills supported by the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the Georgia Association of Realtors, the Georgia Association of Home Builders, and Georgia Habitat for Humanity. So we have some important folks that are supporting us. Let's get to House Bill 514. I realize the hour's late, and I'm going to make all this as brief as we can. Basically, 514 limits local governments from having excessive moratoriums on housing construction. The bill limits them to a moratorium of 180 days, and then it requires that another 180 days pass before a moratorium can be implemented again. The other thing it does is put a limit on permitting fees, to not allow local government to raise permitting fees so that there is revenue for the county being created from the permitting fees. Our intention is to limit the cost of permitting to the administration of the permitting and inspection process. The last thing we did in this bill is propose that cities and counties be allowed to remove fees that they would like to remove, impact fees primarily, so that they might incentivize more construction and more building. That is this bill in a nutshell. Those are the three things. You have the bill, so Mr. Chairman, I will entertain any questions from the committee about this bill.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Washburn. Are there any questions? We do have Representative Thomas.
I just hope you could give me a clarification on line 35 here. It says local governments are authorized to abate, exempt, or waive any fees authorized pursuant to the subsection that relate to zoning decisions and related permits for single-family housing developments or projects of less than 2,500 square feet. Does that mean the whole project is less than 2,500 square feet? It just seems like that language is a little...
individual homes constructed that would be 2,500 square feet each was the intention.
Okay, I just might want to tweak that language just a little bit just to make it clear.
Well, that's a good observation, and I'm sorry for that
No,
confusion.
No, I should have caught you before committee. I'm sorry. I didn't catch it until now. So
I'm sorry.
I said I should have caught you before committee and said something to you about it. I apologize. That's actually my only.
I might point out about that. I appreciate that question because you noticed the 2,500 square feet. You have probably noticed the 1,200 square feet in the next bill we will look at. The idea of the 2,500 square feet was not to incentivize extremely high-end housing to be built, but the thought was, and this came as some input from the Georgia Home Builders Association actually, that when you start talking about entry-level housing of 1,200 square feet, 2,500 square feet, of course, is twice that size, but as families grow, obviously more housing is needed, and it is not all about entry-level housing. It is about housing in general. Any other questions, Mr. Chairman?
At this time, I see no other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and we'll reserve you an opportunity to speak to the bill after testimony if anybody else has.
Well, thank you. Is it now? Do you have testimony against this?
We're going to have. We got some people signed up to speak specifically for this bill.
Okay.
So we'll entertain those, and
okay.
We have some that are signed up to speak for both. And if that's the case, if you'll indicate to me, then we'll wait and let that happen after the second bill is presented, if that's okay with everybody.
But you'll have your speakers on the first bill now,
yes,
correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Let's see. Okay, and again, I'm going to drop back. We had a little bit of an error before when we were discussing 374. We had mentioned Mark, is it Beechuk? That was actually someone who had signed up to speak to Mr. Washburn's two bills. Okay, that we don't have that one. So, okay, and now we'll go to Mr. Jim Thornton with GMA. And looks like
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Todd
Chairman.
Edwards is going to join him.
I think Mr. Edwards is going to join me for this. We'll try to
Okay.
be brief in the interest of time here.
And please, we have an additional, if you'll just introduce everybody that's up here while you're at it, that'd be great. That's going to participate.
Benny Carter with Cherokee County, Commissioner Benny Carter. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jim Thornton with the Georgia Municipal Association, and we support the general intent of House Bill 514. We do have a couple of issues with the specific language in the bill that I wanted to just raise, one of which Representative Thomas already mentioned about the 2,500 square foot issue. We feel like if this bill does advance, that should be clarified. I think the intent of the author, as I understand Representative Washburn, is for residential units that are associated with such a development to be single-family houses with less than 2,500 square feet of conditioned space. So I think that language could be built in and clarified, and that's something that that authority to waive those fees is certainly something that we would support. But if you go back to the moratorium issue, I think the concern we have with the language in the bill as it's currently drafted is that it applies to any moratorium, not just a moratorium associated with a housing or a residential development. This is billed as the Housing Regulation Transparency Act, and certainly there are instances where cities or counties are dealing with industrial projects, large-scale commercial projects, things that bring in much more complicated infrastructure issues, much more complicated zoning issues than are normally associated with a housing development. And so a proposal that we would offer to the committee and to the author is to consider language that would limit that particular restriction of the 180-day limitation to developments associated with residential purposes. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, the last thing that we would suggest that the author and the committee consider is writing into law some specific criteria under which the 6-month, 180-day limitation would not apply. And the things that we're thinking of are a natural disaster, a declared state of emergency, issues that pose a danger to health or safety of persons or property, the order of a federal or state agency with authority, such like an EPD order that comes into place, and then perhaps also there might be a general opportunity for a city or county to extend that moratorium if they were in the midst of conducting a public study, comprehensive rewrite of their zoning code, engineering study, infrastructure study, something that they would have to disclose in public, have a public hearing, but an opportunity for them to extend that, maybe to extend it one time for 6 months. We're thinking that the 6-month window it certainly could be done, that a city could complete a wholesale, an amendment to their zoning code and some of that in 6 months. But that's a tight timeline if you're really trying to get high-quality engineering studies, trying to get public input, conduct public hearings. And so if there was an opportunity for that to be extended in a public and transparent process. But with those suggestions in mind, we will share those specific language with the author as well. But with those in mind, we feel like that this bill could be productive in enhancing zoning procedures in Georgia.
Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, I'm Todd Edwards with the Association of County Commissioners. We share similar concerns to those expressed with Jim at GMA, and we agree that moratoriums should not be indefinite, and they should not be used as a method to stop development. The 180 days is reasonable in most cases, perhaps, or many, or sometimes most, but there are many reasons it could take longer, and we may need an opportunity to extend them. Moratoria, by their nature, they're usually intended to provide time to develop and seek public input on amendments to zoning ordinances, which is an involved process involving notice to the public, both required by the state and perhaps the local zoning ordinance itself. And we ask perhaps consideration for the ability to extend it beyond 90 days, but in doing so to have a public hearing at the local level, not just an automatic extension taken by the County Board of Commissioners, or in this case, I guess it would be the City Council. To get its extension, I mentioned that you'd have to have a hearing. And then section J2, and this refers to permit fees, and the concept being not able to charge more in fees than it costs to provide the services. That actually shows up in law law in many instances pertaining to local government fees. And in fact, I would recommend going back to law. It's OCGA 48-13-9A, and it deals with regulatory fees on occupations and professions. What it says is no local government is authorized to use regulatory fees as a means of raising revenue for general purposes, provided that the amount of the fee shall approximate the reasonable cost of the actual regulatory activity. We would think this would be more appropriate in this sense for y'all's consideration. In the interest of time, I had more comments that related to what GMA has proposed. We'll continue to work together with you and the author moving forward. Again, we're not here to use moratoriums, or nor do we condone as an indefinite measure to stop development, just looking at leeway provided an emergency situation or other circumstances to be able to extend them maybe 1 or 2 times beyond that in 30-day increments. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay. And yes, sir. Okay. All right. Do we have any questions on the part of the committee? Okay. Seeing none. Thank you, gentlemen. Next, I have Mr. Ryan Willoughby. Mr. Willoughby here. Okay. Would you prefer to wait and do both of those together? Yes, sir. Okay. That'll be fine. What's that? Any other questions or comments on the part of the committee at this point? I would like to I'd like to designate 514 as a hearing-only bill and encourage the author and those that presented and had proposed amendments to get together. This bill will be eligible to be called up in full committee. We're having a full committee meeting tomorrow and also on Friday, and possibly come to us with a substitute that we could vote on at that time, if that's acceptable to you, sir. Okay. With that, we'll move on to House Bill 517, and Representative Washburn, you have the podium again.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. The House Bill 517 is LC 365512. And the same comments, preliminary comments I made a few moments ago apply here. This bill is called the Georgia Homeowner Opportunity Act, and the idea is that it is intentional in trying to lower cost for workforce housing of all types in Georgia, and also for first-time homeowners, first-time home buyers. I want to point out before we begin, because this proposes to take away from local governments a lot of the ability to dictate types of siding, types of roofing, color of houses, size of lots, and on and on. We will go here in a moment. It's important, as you know, I've been in the real estate business 47 years, and I've been a real estate license instructor for over 20 years. And so pardon me for giving a bit of a real estate lesson here in this process, and most of you don't need it, but a few might not know what I'm about to say. A private property owner can restrict property in any way he or she or it wants to relative to development. In other words, these limitations are about limiting local government. A private developer could come in and say, we have 50 acres of land and we want to develop it. We want to sell off one lot. They could restrict that in a deed to a certain size of house being built, it being built out of all brick. They can dictate lot size, on and on and on. So we're not suggesting ever that any community would not have higher standards of housing built, but it would be done by the private developer or the private subdivider or the private property owner that sold it. So any neighborhood, any community, any county could have housing that's much bigger, much larger, built out of all brick, at very high standards. There can be architectural committees created that have to approve any plan that's submitted. So I always just want to be sure we all understand that. This is about restricting counties, cities, or consolidated governments from refusing to permit houses based on exterior building color, type or style of exterior cladding materials, styles of materials for roof structures. I won't read them all. You can read them. But one that's significant is some of our counties and cities now want to review interior floor plans before they'll permit a house to be built. So we are proposing to restrict those sorts of things by city and county governments. The major parts of this probably are the square footage size. We are proposing that no city or county can refuse to permit a house that is less size than 1,200 square feet. Now we chose 1,200 square feet because that's about the size of a little 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that a first-time home buyer might want to buy. So 1,200 square feet, and the lot sizes we have restricted to what the health department allows. Again, private developers could say we're going to develop this subdivision and have lot sizes that are 5 acres or 2 acres or whatever it is they want. But we are trying to restrict local governments from requiring that lot sizes be bigger than what the health department is requiring. I should point out to you also that we are not trying to do anything to affect historic districts or historic properties. That is exempted from this. At the end of the day, we believe that this is, of course, it will be, I'm sure we will hear the word preemptive. We always do. This is preemptive. And it is preemptive because we are seeing many, many counties and cities across Georgia now impose a lot of restrictions on single-family homes. And we believe that if we don't address this from a legislative standpoint, that we will begin to see that spread across Georgia. And if we do that, then we let individual cities and counties establish statewide housing policy. And Mr. Chairman, that is the intention of the bill, that we should not allow cities and counties to impose such restrictions that housing costs are much higher than they have to be for Georgians. And we're proposing that to fill the need of first-time home buyers in Georgia and to fulfill the needed supply of workforce housing. And with that, I will yield for any questions the committee might have.
Okay, Representative Washburn, we do have a couple of questions here. First, we'll recognize Chairman Saines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Washburn, for bringing this. I don't doubt that you are probably the most knowledgeable on our real estate market in Georgia in our House body, and that this bill does not come with a lot of friends in terms of it does impact a lot of what we're doing now, with good intent in terms of making sure we have a market. Even in my district in Glenn, we have businesses that aren't able to find workforce housing for Gulfstream or employees, which are relatively highly paid. With that being said, is there any? I appreciate you mentioning the historic districts carve out. My concern is communities with flood mitigation requirements. Is there assurances that those communities could put in place building standard requirements to ensure that flood mitigation and flood zoned areas require a level of building in accordance to that area?
Our intention when the bills were drafted was to certainly we are never suggesting that homes should be built in any way that is inferior or substandard to the building codes. Relative to the coastal areas in particular, certainly I might understand that your building code there might have something increased above that for central Georgia, for instance. And so I certainly have no intention that anything should be required that would not be safe.
So those building codes, and I'm just going to act like I don't know because that might be true. Those building codes the local governments would still be able to have a level of control on building standards through their building codes. That this bill doesn't take away that ability.
Yes, I would agree with that statement that there's no intention to take away that ability. The intention is to take away the ability to make choices for a homeowner in the interest of, well, we don't like vinyl siding in this county, so we're not going to allow any vinyl siding. Or we want this many windows and doors, and of course it's on the list there of everything that's especially is explicitly restricted.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Representative Washburn. I appreciate your endeavor in trying to make sure we have affordable housing in the state and workforce development housing. I think that's important. I do have, I'm going to say several questions here. I'd like to start off with line 37 through 39. No county municipal corporation shall adopt or enforce any ordinance or regulation relating to regulating building design elements of which you list out from 17 to 32. But from what you said, you were just saying they can't enforce permits, and I guess I'm a little confused about that. The term ordinance to me usually it doesn't, and I'm not a city official nor county, but typically a city ordinance doesn't it reference a specific zoning in the ordinance? Is that correct or incorrect?
Well, what we're talking about is saying, well, we're not going to permit, we won't issue a building permit if a house is not 2,000 square feet in size.
But the way I read this specifically, it says, shall not adopt or enforce any ordinance or regulation. And to me, an ordinance would reference whatever the zoning is.
Basically, as far as we can tell, there are some counties and cities that make that is an ordinance. They won't allow a house to be, won't permit a house to be built if it's not built out of a particular thing.
Okay, so and maybe if I need to ask the GMA or ACCG, that's fine. But I mean, what design elements are typically addressed in a zoning ordinance? Maybe we'll take it back a step.
I think they vary from county to county now. That's the intention of this bill.
Okay, but is there anything that we specifically listed in 17 through 32 that would be typically, we don't have to say all, it doesn't have to be broad brush, but typically addressed in a zoning zoning ordinance? Like
I believe so. That's why we're trying to pass legislation to keep that from happening.
And I only ask this because to me, when I read this, lines 49 through 52 seems contradictory, because then it says prohibit or impair the power of the county or municipal corporation to adopt or enforce any zoning ordinance. But specifically, lines 17 through 32 have things that would typically be in a zoning ordinance. That's why I'm just getting confused.
I'm sorry, I hadn't been following your line of question.
Okay.
I don't believe that is in zoning. Zoning, in my view, is about land use. It is about residential goes here, industrial goes here, agricultural over here, some warehouses here, some strip shopping centers are here. And that is probably the crux of this whole issue, is that, in my mind, zoning has to do with land use, not what you build your house out of and how big a house you build.
But typically, don't you see that you would have like an R20, for example? An R20 would be a house maybe every half acre, an R40 would be one every 1 acre. So the zoning ordinance in and of itself dictates land use for that type of zoning to the specifics that maybe touch what you got in here. It's just a comment, something to think about. The other question I have to you is specifically regarding Steinberg criteria, and how does this affect character of an area based off Steinberg criteria, which I know is not really the be-all and end-all anymore, but I would say that one of those is similar in similar view of surrounding properties. What I don't want to see is we have a bunch of R40 houses or R80, and now all of a sudden somebody comes in and it's R10, a house every quarter acre. Does this have any effect on that? I mean, can you just expound on that for me?
I think it's clear it restricts lot size to what the health department requires. Okay. Without water and sewer, it is roughly 1 acre if there's a well in the septic tank. With public water and public sewer, it's roughly a ½ acre. But the language was changed by legislative council, or actually by the home builders, who suggested that we use this language about health department regulations. But it is clear that we are trying to stop a county from saying, if we impose a 2 acre lot minimum in this county, we will slow growth down considerably. And that is a problem because we are moving toward more and more and more. And the experts, way beyond me and my thinking, are recommending denser land use, more houses to the acre because of taxation, because of cost of service delivery, and because of a lot of other things. The intention here is to keep a county or a city from controlling housing costs completely, and land use and land cost, of course, is a big, big component of that.
So, you know, if you start increasing these densities the way you're talking about without some type of check and balance in that system, have you ever thought about the impacts of what it's going to mean for quality of life of people that live in those high density areas, such as traffic? I can tell you, my wife has to commute an hour right now just to get out of I don't like to say out of Cherokee County. Nobody should ever have to leave Cherokee County, but regardless, these are all these impacts. I have concerns. It's not what you have here. I understand what you're doing, but I have concerns about the downstream impacts of what this will do eventually, and that just maybe something to think about when we get into full committee. So.
Well, Representative, I have been in real estate business a long time. And I've been married to my wife, who's here in the audience, for 47 years. And we live in a house, 2,200 square feet on a half acre. And our quality of life is pretty good. And also, by the way, our house has got some vinyl siding on it. And neither one of us, it has not caused a threat to our marriage yet. What you're suggesting, a half acre lot, is not some extremely high density. There are proposals out there for much higher density than that. This is basically health department requirements. So this is not suggesting that we are putting 10 houses to the acre. This is fairly standardized.
Do you know what the minimum lot size is for the health department?
I believe it's reflected right here. I think it is a half acre with public water and sewer, and 1 acre when there is a well and a septic tank.
Okay. No further. Thank you very much, Mr. Representative.
Thank you, Representative.
Okay,
yes,
thank
sir,
you.
Mr.
And
Chairman.
next is Representative Burnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple questions.
Yes, ma'am.
The first one is, how does this affect HOAs?
This does not have any effect on HOAs or on private restrictions. When I started talking about restrictive covenants in neighborhoods, of course you can have restrictive covenants without an HOA, but this is not meant to bypass those organizations.
Okay, so an HOA can go in. I live in an HOA, but so in our neighborhood, we have different houses. They can only be painted a certain way. They built them with certain materials, so that would not affect.
No, ma'am.
Okay. The second question I have is, with the restrictions that you have, will that encourage more boarding houses or personal care houses within certain neighborhoods?
That is an excellent question. I know that is a big concern now, and I keep hearing this term pad splitting, but I don't see anything in this that would encourage any of that. This is mostly designed for little first-time home buyers to be able to buy a home, and for our workforce to be able to buy homes. And so I do not see anything that would increase that issue and problem. I do know that is a problem, though.
And one more question. I understand that we're building houses for a workforce, but I also believe that even if it's for a workforce, they should have not have substandard equipment or building materials, and not something that ends up being where they're all located in this one little area and they have these type of houses. And really the only thing I could think of, and I'm not really trying to be funny, but like Pottersville from Wonderful Life, you know, where all the poor working people live over here, and they live in certain types of houses.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you have the other people, they live in very nice houses. So how does this, because if the cities don't, and then there are a lot of houses in Clayton County, there are 2 neighborhoods I know that were built and no one told the residents, and their houses keep flooding. So where are those restrictions? So if I'm working and then I have a house and then I buy it and then the next thing I know it starts to flood.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
then nobody wants to take any responsibility for it.
That's
So-
an excellent question. We are not suggesting that anything should be built that is not done according to the building code, and that would include any development that's done. It should have sufficient storm sewer and drainage and everything else that is there. This is about the idea that a city or a county could not tell you when you were trying to build a house, well, we will require you to build that brick on 4 sides, or we will not let you build that out of vinyl siding. This is all about architectural design, but that is an excellent question, and no one is suggesting that we want to build any substandard housing that would not last well and that would not be a good investment for the home buyer.
And then this is my last question, because if we're going to take the power from the counties and the cities, if something happens within these houses and they're following these regulations that you have here, the average person is going to go to whoever that city person, their city representative, or they're going to go to their county. It's very seldom they're going to come all the way down here to the state. So if we're taking this power away from them, how will they, if they do have an issue in these areas where if we make this decision, where will they come to make their complaints?
Well, that's an excellent question and a great time for me to clarify. We are not taking away any power from the cities and counties to enforce building codes, to enforce bad actors that might have bad properties that are in bad repair. As far as I know, that is a local government function, both in city and counties. And I've done some investigating. I've talked, because I know we have a lot of other housing issues that are of concern. And I had a long phone call with our local code enforcement guy to find out what they do in Bibb County, because I was curious about some of those questions. None of this bill takes any of that away from the city and counties as far as inferior properties that are in bad repair and those kind of things. This is purely about new permitting and not requiring a house to be 2,000 square feet in size, all brick, or not built out of vinyl siding. This is all about that sort of thing, architectural design that runs cost up.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And last question, if we can, from the committee, because we got a few people signed up to speak. Chairman Sains.
I'll be really quick. You did bring up Ms. Washburn, and you brought up the aesthetics of your house, and you've made very clear that this is about the aesthetics and the architectural design, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that Ms. Washburn's appeal of her aesthetics in her home would change whether you're not in session or at home?
I'm gonna have to ask you to repeat that question.
I'll waive the question.
Thank you, Representative Sains.
Ms. Washburn likes those hardwood floors that I put in her house. Let's tell you, I'll say that.
Okay, thank you, Representative Washburn. And at this time, we're going to go to those who have signed up to speak to the bill. We will start out with Sarita Dyer. If you'd like to come to the front, please. Round the front here and just introduce yourself, tell us who you're representing, and proceed.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarita Dyer from District 117 out of McDonough, Georgia. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. First and foremost, thank you for considering a solution to the affordable housing issue. But I think House Bill 517 is troubling and appears as an overreach. This bill appears as a giveaway to the builders who want to eliminate standards and to maintain an even larger profit value. It introduces the concept of to build fast, build cheap, and after they're gone, the consequences will be in the hands of the local governments. Georgia has 159 counties and 5 distinct geographical regions. A blanket deregulatory approach is likely to undermine public health and create consequences of quality development. Can you imagine the number of aluminum and vinyl siding elevations on the uprise across the state? So instead of a blanket deregulatory, I ask you to consider smart regulatory strategies. I ask you to demand that local governments create a comprehensive plan that is inclusive of its housing market. I ask you allow local governments to govern. They know the infrastructure and are aware of the challenges of their communities and are elected to protecting the life, health, and property of citizens and thus helping to provide a better living environment. In reading H.R. 1449, the final report, it included a lot of industry input to include complaints about impact fees, permit processing timing, and agricultural design standards, to name a few. But I found no data that if the bill is enacted, industry would adjust accordingly. In 2021, Georgia has the second largest amount of investor activity in the country. In a few years, it is projected that 40% of the single-family rental housing nationally will be owned by investors. Are we mandating and deregulating building design for investors' profit? Can you guarantee cost reductions will pass on will be passed on to my fellow Georgians? This bill empowers industry and silences local governments. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Any questions on the part of the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, Noah, is it Rents? Yes, sir. If you'll just come forward and identify yourself and who you represent.
Chairman Anderson and members of the committee, my name is Noah Rainitz, and I work with the Georgia Municipal Association, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today on House Bill 517 and to share our members' concerns and opposition to the bill. I'd like to start by saying that I appreciate Representative Washburn's recognition of housing affordability and access as a serious concern, not only to the economic engine of our state, but more importantly to the citizens of Georgia. GMA was active in the Housing Study Committee last fall, and I believe I personally testified before that study committee longer than any other participant. While we may disagree on the findings from that study committee today and the legislation before the subcommittee today, we find that the effectiveness of the legislation before this subcommittee today is not there. GMA and Georgia cities stand ready to continue our work to develop housing solutions on the housing issues facing our state, and GMA will advocate for solutions to our state's housing issues that provide for local control while ensuring affordability is realized in the legislation presented. With that being said, the bill before you today strips away at core constitutional provisions granted to local governments. The restrictions levied under the loosely defined building design elements section take away the ability of community residents to have meaningful engagement in the local planning process. No one can speak better to those impacts than these individuals right here. And with that, I'd like to introduce who we've brought to speak along with us today. These are city officials from all across the state of Georgia. First, we have a Georgia realtor, the mayor of Tifton, and the president of the Georgia Municipal Association, Julie Smith. She will be followed by the mayor of Woodstock and a former representative in the state house, Michael Caldwell. Then the executive director of planning and zoning for Macon Bibb, Jeffrey Rudegeri, and then the mayor of College Park and GMA's third vice president, Bianca Motley Broom. So with that, Mayor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon, but let me also thank you for your service to the state of Georgia. I know it's challenging times that we live in, and I appreciate the work that this body does for our state. Like Noah said, my name is Julie Smith. I have been the mayor of the city of Tifton for the last 8 years, involved in our city council for 12 years. I've been a Georgia realtor for over 20 years. I am a co-owner of a small real estate company in Tifton, associate broker, and have made a very good living, and it's been very good to my family. Tifton's been my marketplace for a long time. There is no question, absolutely no question, that we all agree workforce housing is a priority. Our police officers, our firefighters, our public works officials, every resident of this state needs safe, quality, and affordable housing. All residents need access to that. This bill does not provide an answer to workforce housing. It removes all public input. Anytime that we do anything on a local level, we have public hearings. They're heard by our planning and zoning departments, which are our planning and zoning boards, which are people, citizens, residents of our community who have volunteered their time to be a part of this. We work on comprehensive plans. We work closely with the Department of Community Affairs. We have public input and process. There's due process for everything within the government that we do. House Bill 17 would prevent local citizens from working with their locally elected officials to establish those standards that are appropriate for each unique community. Every community differs throughout our entire state. We've heard that already. This bill goes further than prior preemption efforts and upends zoning classifications by setting a statewide square footage standard and statewide lot requirements. Again, we have removed the voice of the people from the process with House Bill 17. All of the work that we do is done publicly. It's not done in a vacuum. Like I said, we public notice. We have public hearings. We have city council meetings. The public is invited to come, and we do the will of the public. Workforce housing is a priority, no question. But this bill does not address that priority. And so today we'd like to propose something different. As the president of GMA and as a realtor in my community, I can assure you that GMA and ACCG are committed to convening a working group this summer to address the housing needs of our state from all perspectives. We can accomplish great things if we invite our friends and neighbors from the Georgia Association of Realtors, the Home Builders Association, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the nonprofit community, and housing advocates and others to join us in identifying real, true solutions that will offer more affordable housing options for all of Georgia's residents. We do not feel House Bill 517 offers that. So thank you in advance for your consideration. And again, thank you for the work that you do for our state. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, we do have one question. Representative Sainz.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mayor, and appreciate your testimony. And,
Thank you.
Not in light of what you said, but I know there's a common verbiage of the easiest way to solve a hard question is to study it. There has been a great amount of convening in this subject. Is there
Right.
some solid points that GMA would propose that would address a housing issue in a direct way at this point?
I think that there would be, and I think that's the reason that we're proposing that we get all the groups together in the room. Some of my fellow speakers this afternoon may address some of those, but the recommendation would be let's study it further. The problem didn't happen overnight. The problem is not going to get solved overnight, and the concern here is that this takes away the voice of the local community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no other questions. Thank you. Okay, and if you will just introduce yourself again and
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank y'all for having me. I'm not a stranger to all of you. My name is Michael Caldwell. I'm the mayor of the city of Woodstock, and I actually spent 8 years serving down here with you guys. From 2013 to 2021, I served Woodstock in the House of Representatives, and for those of you I served with, I hope you still like me. I also serve as a member of the Board of Directors for the Atlanta Regional Commission, and I'm the governor's appointee on the Georgia Technology Authority. And I say all of that to try to make clear, I don't want to come to you guys today as a local official preaching local control because rah-rah, it's the right answer all the time, because blatantly it's not always. I want to come to you today to talk to you as a shared outcome-driven policymaker. The question we should be asking ourselves is what's the outcome we're trying to drive and where do we best accomplish that outcome to make sure that we're driving that solution for Georgians across this state. And so I think House Bill 517 represents an admirable effort to drive an outcome in an issue that we are all facing, and that's an affordable housing crisis that genuinely isn't unique to Georgia. This is a problem across the union. What I love about you guys is the Georgia General Assembly never throws their hands up at a national crisis. We go solve them. And so you guys lead on things like business. I have no doubt you'll lead on things like the affordable housing crisis. My ask of you is that we make sure that your local partners are partners in that process. And so this is where I want to focus my very brief time with you today. House Bill 517 preempts your local partners from engaging in several valuable, important facets of community development. And here, the important facet of this is it doesn't guarantee a single affordability outcome in doing so. The first among this extensive list deals with things like design color, and I will tell you, in Woodstock we don't regulate color, but I have a hard time believing that the difference in color of a house is the main driving facet in the affordability crisis that we're facing today. And so as we face this, I want us to all to share and understand that design standards, by their very nature, are changing variables. They were different 50 years ago, the metrics that we care about in design, than they are today. They were different 10 years ago than they are today. They'll be different 10 years from now. And so this list that we're approaching and this list that we're looking at, these things change. They change based on consumer preferences. They change based on supply and product availability. They change based on our constituents' preferences. And most importantly, they change based on geography. And geography is a thing you guys have a whole lot of. This is the largest state east of the Mississippi River. It has almost every ecosystem that the eastern United States has to offer. And the needs in housing product for Representative Saines and St. Mary's are very different than the needs for the chairman in Cornelia. And we have a very differing, diverse state with lots of different needs. And so setting statewide standards and outright prohibitions on a list of household design features that doesn't solve the crisis we're all focused on addressing doesn't actually solve for the outcome that we're looking to drive, but it does dramatically erode our local government's ability to plan and deliver tailored communities for the constituents that we all share and serve. It's really hard to change state law. I know my former suite mate would say that. He's been working on this for a long time. I remember that from being down here. It's a tough hill to climb, and it should be. And that's an important thing to remember as we go through this, because presuming that we're going to get the right answers to these problems that will remain right forever, set statewide across one of the most diverse states in the union, and place them in OCGA and rest on that, sets the stakes very high. It's almost like it would have been great if we'd set up smaller forms of government throughout the state that could assess this and figure it out in working with our citizens, except that we did in the form of cities and counties. And we recognize that in ensuring that these standards are set in places where they can be easily solved and pivoted as the market and the needs of our constituents change is the better outcome driver. My city is the 28th largest city in the state. We have 38,000 citizens. I have been preaching density at 2 states of the city in a row. The most people we've ever had show up for a local election ever is 1,800. I share that to say I'm dramatically easy to fire. And there are probably some developers behind me doing that math right now. And what I would suggest is if we find we get these prohibitions wrong, it will be very difficult to come back here and solve for that. And it will have drastic impacts on our communities across the state. If I get this wrong in Woodstock, they'll fire me, and they should. And then we can solve for that. And so my ask of you is not to do nothing, because this is a real crisis. And I told you at the start, I expect you to lead on it. I know you will. My ask of you is let's target outcome-driven policy focus. Let's talk about the speaker that preceded GMA did a spectacular job suggesting the comprehensive housing plan side of this. I think you should require that we look at and forecast housing expectations and population growth. We should be planning around those things. We should be working with our regional commissions. These are things that will drive us back to the table with our private partners and our constituents to talk through how we meet those needs as the future drives them. But if we're not driving those solutions toward the actual outcome we're after, we're putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound here. We're not actually solving the underlying problem. It looks prettier. But my ask of you is to focus on the real problem and use us. We want to partner with you in this. This is important. I agree. This has been discussed and debated, and part of that's because this is a state of 10.5 million people, and these are vitally important policy focuses that will have ramifications for a long, long time. So my ask of you is involve us in this. I want to say thank you for your consideration on these issues. It's important. We're grateful for you fighting for it. Let's fight together.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions on the part of the committee?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, if you will introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the Assembly. I appreciate the time. My name is Jeff Ruggieri. I'm the Executive Director of Macon Bibb Planning and Zoning Commission. I've been in Macon for about a year. Before that, I was the Director of Development Services in a small town in eastern North Carolina called New Bern, where this same bill actually was passed in 2015. I got 23 years experience in both the public and private sector, overseeing large-scale mixed-use developments in the private sector and overseeing growth and development organizations in the public sector. I've written thousands of pages of land use regulations, from comprehensive plans to zoning codes to overlays, rezoning petitions, redevelopment plans, and housing programs. I say that because I've sat across the table from housing developers and affordable housing professionals many times in my career. And not once can I recall a conversation centered around those items in House Bill 15, that addressed the affordability of housing. Those conversations that I do have center around land costs. They center around connection fees. They center around permit fees. They center around the time to get something approved. Those are the three big issues that I've dealt with over 23 years in trying to find a good mix between housing affordability and market rate housing. I do find it fascinating that a contemporary group of housing professionals here in Georgia last fall got together and recommended the same bill that was passed in North Carolina about 8 years ago. Sometimes I feel like I'm in the twilight zone. When you stick around long enough, it all comes back around. However, we have been given the gift here of a foresight. We can just look at North Carolina, what that bill did for housing affordability. It did nothing. And I can tell you the data suggests it. My personal experience, I bought my home in 2012. I sold it in 2022 for 65% more than I bought it for, in a bidding war of 5 people. So I understand. I was there when this bill was passed the first time in North Carolina, and it did literally nothing. The bill is misguided at best. You know, it attempts to solve a problem with ineffective measures. I think some of the other speakers have addressed that also. Just the arrow's not hitting the bullseye. At worst, it gives the illusion that you all are elected officials that we put up here to solve our problems are actually solving the problem of affordable housing, but this obviously does nothing for that. Einstein said you can't solve a problem at the same level of thinking that created the problem. This bill obviously even fails to rise to that standard. It's probably a couple levels below that. Affordable housing is much more of a comprehensive issue than presented in this bill. And I think the previous speakers have touched on all that, have great ideas on how to go forward. I'd be more than happy to sit in any of these conversations with people. I've had conversations all over the United States. I've worked in Texas, North Carolina, Florida, and now Georgia. I have a tremendous amount of experience in high growth areas. So to quote one of your members earlier when I walked in, he said, I think his final thing was, there is a better way. I would reiterate that also. House Bill 17 really isn't that better way. I suggest we really address the issue, look at it, and tackle it from what we can control and what we cannot control. And that's it. If I have any questions, I'll take them. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if you'll just identify yourself and proceed, thank you.
First, I have to get the microphone a little higher. Mr. Chairman, good afternoon. Committee members, good afternoon. My name is Bianca Motley Broom. I am the mayor of College Park, Georgia, and the third vice president of the Georgia Municipal Association. And I am here to tell you about a success story in progress. In my community, about a generation ago, we lost half of our population to airport expansion. We have worked to assemble parcels for nearly 20 years. We are at a point right now where we are poised to develop 6 West. It is a 300-acre mixed-use development just west of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. It has a residential component. We've recently come under contract for that residential component. But that wasn't until we got community input. That wasn't until the city did a master plan. We are currently building the main road through 6 West. The city has invested over $20 million in this project. And that's before a single person lives there, shops there, or does any level of business there. We are excited about this development. It will change the trajectory not only of our city, but the entire southern crescent of Metro Atlanta. There is huge anticipation for this project. We have had public hearings, we've had charrettes, we have listened to our community, and they have told us what they want to see there. This is a process that has taken years. With the stroke of a pen, House Bill 517 could take all of that away. For instance, House Bill 517 tells us we can't say what type of roofing material we want to see in our residential component of 6 West. We've said you can't use rolled roofing material. We've said that because the durability of rolled roofing material is lesser than some other roofing materials. The residential component of 6 West is our first component. We are building this community to last. We are building a community that we deserve. House Bill 517 takes that away from us. How are we going to develop the rest of it if the residential component in 5 years looks worn, torn, and the burden goes to the homeowners? Because these structures have been built with lesser quality materials. The builders are gone at that point. The homeowners are the ones who will have to figure out how to replace that roof because it looks frayed, it's not fitting community standards. We're going to get the calls for our code enforcement that's already overburdened, overtaxed with all the things that they have to do within our community. We are continuously seeking community input. And there are similar stories across the state. I talked to my colleagues in Forest Park, Chattahoochee Hills, Fairburn. They're all concerned about this bill because we all know that good planning leads to good economic development. And no one knows what will work better than the people who live in a community. Nothing in this bill actually addresses affordability. And it very much has the potential to be a health and safety issue as we deal with unscrupulous builders who have come into many of our communities promising the world and delivering very little. I would also note that under current law, private covenants expire after 20 years. After that time, the only protection a homeowner has that the neighboring lot will have any standards is zoning law. So in conclusion, I ask that you keep on letting our success story develop. It's going to be a great one. As a community, we should have the ability to determine how our future will look, and House Bill 517 stands in our way. Thank you very much for your time. I'm open to questions.
Okay, thank you. We have one question. Representative Bernal.
Hello, Mayor. How are you?
It's always a pleasure, Representative. Good to see you.
And in full disclosure, I do represent part of College Park in Clayton County. I just had one question. The neighborhood that you're talking about, 6 West, is it in the near the airport? And then would those houses have would the planes going over those houses have an impact on them if they weren't built with quality materials?
A huge impact.
Okay.
We are constantly concerned about noise standards in our community. It is something that we're dealing with a development that is actually a little bit further down the road. 6 West is going to be on the northern side of Camp Creek Parkway. If all of you are familiar with the Georgia International Convention Center, which is the second largest convention center in the state, it is on the other side of Camp Creek, and 6 West will be opposite that. And so it is most definitely in the flight path, and it's critical that we are making sure that all of our residents have the protections within their homes to ensure that they're not troubled by noise, because we know through research at the federal level and beyond that noise impacts quality of life. It can impact learning for children. If you don't sleep well because of noise, it can impact your health, including high blood pressure, diabetes, and the like. So as a local community that understands those issues, it is imperative that we have the ability to regulate them.
Thank you very much. That's the only question we have.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the sign-up sheet is Todd Edwards with ACCG. And I don't want to cut anyone short. I'm just saying we're getting a little later in the evening, so if we can try to be as succinct as possible when we talk, and I know Todd can do that, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Todd, ACCG. In the interest of time, Mr. Chairman, I had a long, drawn-out list of remarks. I'll get straight to the point and then introduce a couple of county officials from across the state because I know it's much more important to hear from them. ACCG is not here to debate the merits of design standards. We have worked and will continue to work on affordable housing. It's a tough issue to solve at the state, at the local level. There's a lot of factors other than some would have you believe that local government regulations, were it not for they, housing would be affordable. It's not that easy. Again, we have no position on design standards. However, we do believe that county commissioners, city officials from across the state, that decision should rest with them in these areas that would be preempted. Those are the ones that are elected and accountable to their local constituents. And I'd love from y'all to hear from a few of them from across the state to share their experiences in their communities. And then first, I'd like to invite up Cherokee County Commissioner Benny Carter, again from Cherokee County. I hope that was short enough for you, sir.
That was perfect. Thank you. Mr. Carter, if you don't mind, we just got your name, but just introduce yourself, and we'd appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I'm Benny Carter, District 3 Commissioner from Cherokee County, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for hearing us today. And I'm smart enough to know not to stand between you and dinner, okay? Let me tell you a little bit about Cherokee County. We're a large geographical county, and we pride ourselves in the diversity throughout our county, both in the areas, the communities, the neighborhoods, and the cities. From our southern city of Woodstock, which is a very urban city, to our northern farmland of Salacoa Valley. So we pride ourselves in that there's great diversity in Cherokee County. As county commissioners, we find ourselves challenged. How do we address all of those needs? Very unlikely that we can find one ordinance or one ruling that fits all. And I think we can say that about this bill. I think it's very difficult to think that we can compile a bill that will address the unique needs of 150 counties throughout our state. And so I would ask that you consider who best to do that: your residents, your staff, and your elected officials. Let us be the one that dictate what our county demands. And in fact, much like the mayor said, we have many open meetings. We take input from our residents. We take input from our building associations, from our quality Council for Quality Growth. So we get that input as we make decisions. And I think it's appropriate that you allow those decisions to be made locally. Just a couple of points. We follow our comprehensive land use plan, which dictates lot sizes in particularly zoning districts. We don't necessarily regulate design at the county level except in zoning conditions. But our residents are very vocal, and they want to have these particular areas and with design standards to meet their needs. And I'd ask that you allow us to continue to do that at the local level with residents, professional staff, and your elected officials. And much like Mayor Caldwell said, they will eliminate us if we do not fulfill their needs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I see no questions for you. And Mr. Edwards, next.
Next, I'd like to invite up Mr. Brett Haynes. He's the Assistant Director of Building and Plan Review for Henry County.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on this today. My name is Brett Haynes. I'm the Assistant Director of Henry County Building and Plan Review. We work hand in hand with our Planning and Zoning Department. What we do would not be possible without them. Many times today, comprehensive plans have been brought up. Specifically, line 36 of House Bill 514 speaks to local government's comprehensive plans. As mentioned by many of my colleagues, these are developed with public input, ARC, Department of Community Affairs. Many different organizations are involved in these processes. However, there are egregious line items in House Bill 517, specifically line 32, lot width minimums and road frontage minimums. I'm sure many of you, if you might live on a half-acre lot, you might live on a subdivision, different places. This essentially negates our ability to control that size. In addition, earlier there was a question proposed about the building code requirements for floodplains. line item H says that foundation structures approved under state minimum standard codes. I want everyone to pay attention to the word minimum. In 8-2-20 of OCGA, that's where our state minimum codes are defined. Those are the international codes. From time to time, we have to update these via ordinance. The DCA only adopts these codes every 6 years. Sometimes in the effort of assisting public safety and welfare, we have to update these. This bill would prohibit that. Lastly, we also have great concern, forgive me, line item 37, no county or municipal corporation shall adopt or enforce. Now, the adoption would be in relation to new ordinances. Enforcing would be previous ordinances. Henry County, we are working on updating our zoning regulations currently. In the past, we've adopted these via condition that are then recorded on final plats. These are now completed subdivisions that may or may not have infill lots. This line item would prohibit us from requiring the new structures that may or may not be built on these lots from complying with those already adopted regulations due to the verbiage listed here. Anyone have any questions?
Okay, any questions on the part of the committee? See none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And last but not least, we'd like to welcome Commissioner Todd Levent from Forsyth County.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, Mr. Chairman, fellow members of the House. I've been on the board now, it's my 13th year. I will have 4 full terms recently. And what I have learned, you will stay around a very long time and not even have competition when you listen to your citizens. Zonings is probably the most contentious item you'll ever deal with, which I've seen as many as 700 people standing in our room outside. We even had to put TVs out in hallways for these type of moments. I will rest assured the state doesn't want to take that on. It is probably the biggest headaches why a lot of people don't run for county commission. We spend a lot of time with our public, probably more than most. We postpone our comprehensive plans over and over again, trying to get more and more input. We have, in the last 2 updates over the last 7 years, over $500,000 invested in them, and thousands of people coming to speak, either online or in meetings. Our community is very, very engaged in how they want to live, and that quality of life to them is not just what they live in. It's what everything is around them. It's our park and recs. It's everything that we do for them. Local government works off home rule. The voice of the people, we're the closest to them. We're in the roots with those folks. But once a week I speak to another HOA. I listen to what they need, what they want, and we try to always serve their needs as best as we can. That home rule is what's part of that, right? We get to learn who they are, what they want, and that's how we govern everything we do. There's 425 cities that are incorporated in this state, 159 counties. That's a lot of zonings that are going on that you guys don't want to really deal with. And the last thing you want is them calling us saying, I'm sorry, we can't listen to you anymore on those certain line items, because that's been taken away from us and given to the state instead. I will say that I learned something when I first got in office. I was elected in 2010. This is pretty big when it comes to workforce and who actually dictates how big a house is and how much it's going to cost. We had 18,000 to 20,000 residential homes zoned when I got into office from the downturn of the economy. And probably a third or more of them were already developed and sitting with a green standpipe from sewer everywhere around the county. The interesting part was we used to allow a lot of smaller lots to try to give a little more affordable houses and this, that, and the other, and have quite a diversity of them even today. What I got when the market started to come back in the end of 2011, 2012 was a lot of phone calls and a lot of meetings, and developers wanted to take those lots that they've already built that they ended up with through the banks back again, and they wanted me to give variances to everything because the market was asking for bigger homes. Free market, that's what America does. It's free market driven, most everything we do. Yes, we don't let vinyl siding and brand new neighbors anymore. That happened after a condominium complex caught on fire, and we had testimony from the state fire marshal and our fire marshals and our fire chief and how hot that stuff gets and how quick all those buildings burnt down before the first truck could even get there. And our response times are the best in the state. So it was for us, public safety. I'm an ex-deputy marshal. I'm public safety. I've even built up to 280 houses myself, so I understand that side of it as well. I would say that this bill needs to go nowhere. It doesn't help our community. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help us forge our future. When I say us, I mean I'm talking for our citizens. I listen to them. Almost everything I do is what they tell me to do. And all obviously within the color of the law. That's just how we operate in Forsyth County, Georgia. I also learned through all my years that we get density. It puts a major impact on the community, so we carefully put it closer to the highways and closer to the larger roads, and it's designed that way on perfect in our comprehensive plans to make better sense of your community. We have 2.7 children in every one of our houses, about our average right now, with the cost, according to the school board, at $9,000 a child. So you can't put so much density and you don't figure out how you're going to pay for that bill. And you have to be able to have your own comprehensive plans where commercial goes, where residential goes. You have to be able to lay out your communities to make total common sense and with a work. Personally, I think any kind of government is a business. It's nothing less than business. You have to have a plan from A to Z on the whole overall program. And zoning is one of the biggest things that will affect your community and how it's done and how successful you're going to be for your citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions on the part of the committee? See none.
I'll just sum it up very briefly. A lot has been said here today. Wanted to point out this is not just design standards being looked at in this bill. It's also, as mentioned earlier, lot sizes, thus density. And so those have other impacts. And locals have to take these into consideration, balancing them with their need to expand infrastructure, roads, sewer, water, and sewer, so water, et cetera. So again, it's not just design standards. It can impact density as well. A lot has been said today that this would lessen the price of houses going in. There are a lot of factors that control that outside local government regulations. And if in fact it did lessen the price, there's no assurances that these savings would be passed on to either the homeowner who buys the home or the investment firm who buys it and then turns it into a rental. I had much more, but in the interest of time, I know you're losing attendance. I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for your all's time and consideration.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Next, we'll call Mr. Ryan Willoughby.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for your time and attention today. I know that you're all ready to go, so I'm going to be quick. My name is Ryan Willoughby. I'm with Habitat for Humanity of Georgia. I'm sure many of you are familiar with our brand. We've been here in the state since 1976. We've helped over 9,000 Georgians achieve the dream of affordable home ownership. We operate in 47 different affiliates that are covering 85 plus counties across the state of Georgia. So we're helping over 450 families every year to actually achieve the dream of home ownership. And the simple fact is this: we're in the midst of an unprecedented housing crisis. And under no uncertain terms, the overregulation is contributing to that crisis. It may not be the sole driver of it, as housing is a very complex issue, as many have stated. It is still a factor and still needs to be addressed. And that is why we are here advocating on behalf of Bill 517. We have worked closely with Chairman Washburn and honored by his opportunity that he extended to us to testify regarding this matter and what we have seen on the ground. And so instead of belaboring you with my points, I would like to actually, if it's your pleasure, sir, introduce some of my colleagues and some of our Habitat homeowners actually, who can actually share about their experience with this crisis of affordability. Mr. Chairman, or
that'll be fine if we can.
I understand, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'd like to introduce Ms. Brittany Neal. She's a Habitat homeowner from Austell, Georgia. She's actually joined by her two lovely sons, Asher and Lockett. And so they actually took the time away today to come and tell you about their experience with the affordability crisis that they're facing. So
And I've seen these two young men hanging around outside in the hallway and that sort of thing. They're very well behaved. Sorry for the delay, and thank you for staying around.
That's okay. Thank you for having us today. Yes, I'll make it quick, but I'll share our story. I was on the journey for homeownership for several years. I was married and our husband walked out on my family. I actually have 2 older daughters as well. So I was a single parent with 4 kids living in a rental that they sold out from under us because of the housing market. They wanted to sell to an investor, and I had 30 days to get out. And we got into the first house we could find, which was $2,500 a month for rent. So I was working as a life enrichment director at a senior living community. I have, had a good job. But I have 4 little ones to take care of, and $2,500 a month is a lot of money on one income. And I went through my savings just trying to keep us afloat, just trying to make it so that we weren't living in our car. It was because of Habitat for Humanity that our lives have now been changed. I was coming to the end of my lease. I could not afford our rent to go up anymore, and I could not find another house for us to go to. And so I applied for Habitat for Humanity, and we were chosen. We built our house last year and closed in August. And now, because of that, I'm giving my children an opportunity to not repeat the cycle of what they have already been born into, that it wasn't their choice. They get the opportunity of generational wealth. They get the opportunity to have pride in a home and maintain it and learn how to take care of our yards, to take care of our home, and just be homeowners, have a stable home where they feel safe, where we don't have to leave again in another year and pack it up. They've never been able to decorate their rooms. We're in a different phase in our life now, and it's because of Habitat for Humanity that we're there. And so I'm definitely in support of this. And so this is my family, and thank you for letting us be here.
Okay, we do have a question right here, Representative Sainz.
First, thank you guys for being here, and your boys seem like they have much more stamina than some of us in terms of this length of the meeting. But did you mention that the rental that you had, it was a real estate investor company?
The first one I did. So the first one I had, the first one I lived in was like an owner, and he sold it to a real estate investor. The second one I was in was a company, and they had a lot of fees, and that's a lot of the way a lot of rentals are now. So
thank you for taking the time out to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no more questions, and congratulations on your home ownership.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Brittany, thank you so much. Brittany is a shining example of the work that we exhibit to do at Habitat by providing safe, decent, affordable homes. And so I would also like to introduce to you my colleague, Ms. Jessica Gill. She is the CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Northwest Metro Atlanta. She is covering Cobb, Douglas, and Paulding counties here in the state of Georgia. Jessica.
Thank you for hanging in. I think I'm the last one, right? Okay, well, I get the opportunity to tell you my story. This story is about Cobb County and the efforts we went through to try to rezone a 7.4 acre lot that we owned back in 2021. This was an R20 lot. And what I was attempting to do was take it from 11 homes, which we could have gone and built, no problem, as is, to 12. And I was doing that for 3 reasons. 1, I actually had 12 homeowners waiting for a house, just like Brittany. So that was one reason. 2, economies of scale. It costs us less with the more houses we can build. That's just how this works. And not one person I've heard from today has said anything about the costs of homes. We have not talked about pricing at all. So I just want to point that out. So that helps us with density. The third reason was I wanted to try to bring the community in and have the elected officials have a say in what was happening. They wanted to be a part of it. I knew they had concerns. So we talked about an HOA. We talked about a dog park. We talked about a walking trail. We talked about putting covenants in place that would enable us to keep these homes looking good for years to come. We did all those things. I was assured that this was going to pass. We went to consent, and the morning of, I was told it was pulled from consent and it was put on regular agenda, and you know that doesn't always go well. So what ended up happening, and I also said, let's put a garage on. They wanted a garage. I said, we can do that. That had $7,000 to $10,000 to a house. Fine. We're going to put a garage on these homes. When I went in, they went ahead and rezoned me from R20 to R15, but they put stipulations in place, and these stipulations increased the cost of a house from $30,000 to $50,000 more. They wanted, and again, architectural design can be great if done and not put too much into. We were asked to do all bricks instead of just regular hardy plank siding. We used to have brick on just the front. We were asked to do all brick. We were asked to build 6 2-story homes and 6 1-story homes. When you work for Habitat, you use volunteers. Volunteers drive the cost down. We had to bring in subcontractors if we're going to build a 2-story house. That increased the costs for us. The thing to remember here is, and then the additional thing. These homes were going to be 1,400 to 1,600 square feet. They had a minimum of 1,800. Again, drives the cost of these houses way, way up. Brittany's house sold for $234,000 at appraised value. We are serving people who are in 30 to 80% of the area median income. There's actually a ton of federal funding that all of these communities have flowing through them that actually have stipulations where we have to serve 30 to 80% of the area median income. You're getting away from being able to pay for a house that's within that range when you start putting on all these stipulations. The minimum square footage has to be the worst. I have to say that. You're just increasing the price by so much. We are trying so hard to work with these communities, and I'll tell you, the city of Marietta gets it. They came to us and they wanted to work with us, and they aren't putting the stipulation of 1,800 square feet on us. And we're going to be able to build these houses for less than $250,000 and we're going to be able to continue that for years to come. But when you have all these other stipulations and there's no governance, and the counties can just turn around on a whim and say, hey, you know what, you're going to have to do this for us to pass this. I lost 12 homes that day. We couldn't build. I sold the lot. So I'm asking you to really consider what's happening in this state. Thank you.
Okay, we do have one question, if you don't mind. Representative Burnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for you. Habitat for Humanity has been around a long time.
Yes, ma'am.
When did you all start having these issues? Has that just been since we couldn't find affordable housing, or did you always have issues with the cities and counties in terms of building?
So we at Habitat for Humanity here in Georgia specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting you asked that. We actually started on a multiracial Christian community in South Georgia, and so we had issues with counties and cities back then in the 1940s and 50s who didn't care for that very much. But as far as these specific issues that we're facing right now, I would say they've been exacerbated in recent years, particularly post 2008. As we've got through that housing crisis, and now we're moving into another crisis where we simply don't have the number of units that we need to have, and it's created this environment that, as Jessica said, just makes it unattainable to provide affordable housing units at a reasonable rate that we can actually serve the people who we desire to serve. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's no more questions. And anybody else? Okay.
No, sir. We just thank you very much for your time and appreciate your attention the subcommittee's giving. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have one kind of a last-minute sign-up. If we can ask Mr. Hackney, Austin Hackney, if you'll come to the front.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Austin Hackney. I am the Executive Vice President of the Home Builders Association of Georgia. So I am here to speak in favor of the bill and represent our home builder companies as well as our home buyer clients in doing so. The bill is very simple. It starts by explaining what a building design element is. It's got a list, you can see right there, and then it just simply states that cities and counties should not be regulating or enforcing these building design elements, which are architectural, aesthetic elements. They don't have anything to do with the structure, the integrity of the house, the quality of the building material. They are strictly aesthetic design related. So we support that initiative because these design elements are expensive. No city or county has ever mandated a design element that makes the house cost less. And we see our buyers across the state. Obviously, we're in a housing crisis, affordability crisis. We think that we haven't heard any testimony today that would say that any of these design elements don't add cost. I don't think anybody's made that argument today. So the only argument we've heard is that we should continue to be able to do that, or we should study the issue a little bit further. And so I'm here today to tell you that the status quo has gotten us here. we're in a housing affordability crisis. This is something we could do that would literally not require new homes to cost more than they have to. And that being said, I'd like to address some of the comments that have been made throughout the day or throughout the afternoon, and just answer a couple of questions that have come up from the committee and from speakers. But I know Representative Thomas, you had a question about the quality of life for the people in the community where these density changes might happen, where these aesthetic design choices might not be made to the will of the local government. But my argument would be that if we allow for more people to live near where they work, we might not have as many traffic issues in Metro Atlanta and other metro areas of the state that we suffer from today. And I think we see full-on zip codes, full-on city governments, full-on counties even, where people just can't afford to live there. And a lot of that has to do with land prices. And I think we are attempting to address that, land prices, with the lot size provision in the bill. If land is very expensive and we require a minimum lot size of a certain acreage, we're recognizing that the house that gets built on that is going to cost more than it would have to if the lot wasn't as big. I also wanted to address some other components of what the bill does, what it might not actually do. The question about the foundations that's specifically listed as a building design element that are approved under the state building code. State building code is the IRC, it's the International Residential Code. It's adopted by the International Code Council. The State Department of Community Affairs vets that code and amends it to be Georgia specific. And then local governments are allowed to adopt local amendments to the building code. So the foundation structures that are approved under the code are scientifically tested foundation structures. Those are international standards. There's no community in Georgia that needs to build foundations in a different way that's not recognized by the code. The code recognizes the difference between a coastal area and a mountain area and makes provisions for that in the text. So a builder that builds in one or the other is going to know exactly what to do based on those requirements. It's hard to change a law. That's a good thing. I think the point that we're trying to make about these design standard mandates is that these are laws. Design whims change year to year. There's a very good chance that there are going to be laws on the books for decades that require homes to be built to a certain look that was popular at a given time, and then it's hard to change that law and update it. So we recognize that aesthetics change. We don't believe that there is any provision in House Bill 517 that would allow for substandard construction. There are minimum standard codes across the state. Like I said, locals have the opportunity to adopt local amendments to those building codes. These are scientifically proven building techniques that are approved internationally, and that is what dictates every single new house in Georgia. So the fact that the state legislature might step in and say that cities and counties can't make housing more expensive through these aesthetic design mandates would mean that new housing is going to be substandard or less than a safe house built with integrity. That's just not what the words on the page say. I think that's an exaggeration that's not based in reality. The HOAs that are recognized in the bill are going to be able to enforce their own design covenants moving forward. Anybody that lives in an HOA, this would not affect that. Any subdivision developer that wants to institute a new HOA would have a new reality to operate under. And today, that reality is a big stick from the locals who say, you're going to build these houses to look the way we want them to look, and that's because it says so right here in our local laws. We think that if you were to pass this bill, that conversation would become a negotiation between two parties who want to come to an equitable solution. So where the design mandate could be negotiated too, if a builder wants density, then they've got to build with brick or whatever it is. that becomes a conversation and negotiation and not just a big stick from the local government. I also wanted to thank you for the opportunity to address you. I'll close by saying that the regulations on the books today, the design mandates that Chairman Washburn is trying to do something about, guarantee expense. Getting rid of those mandates will guarantee that those expenses are not required by the government. They're a choice of the homeowner, a choice of the consumer when they build their dream house, we hope. So with that, I'll close and answer any questions that I might have inspired.
Okay, we do have a few questions. Chairman Saines, did you? Okay.
And forgive me if you mentioned it. The one or one of the causes of raise of interest that a testimony prior to you mentioned is the limitation of material that might present a fire hazard. Would you say I understand the idea of limiting items for aesthetic purposes only, but I'd be hesitant to limit specifically governments from items they deem public safety. Do you have any enlightenment on that?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So public safety is absolutely recognized in the building codes. You know, flame retardant materials, fire safety materials, those are all tested and vetted at an international level. So the products and the building components that are approved under the code go through a very thorough process to find out if they're safe or not. And so my contention would be that if this international body that's vetted at the national, state, and local levels approves these building materials, you know, the science behind that is going to say that those are safe to use products.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since the goal of HB 517 is to develop houses for the workforce, so would building the house is away according to 517. So would that house cost the same if you built it in Clayton County and if you built it in Alpharetta? So that workforce would still be able to afford to live in Alpharetta?
So I think it's a complicated issue. Land prices are going to differ between Clayton County and North Fulton. I think that's a given. I think what we're talking about today is once that lot is purchased and a homeowner wants to move forward to construct their home, that the design elements that a local government might require are going to be just as expensive in either location. So if the state steps in and says, we want to provide workforce housing, we are seeing a connection between $30,000 to $50,000 to $100,000 of extra expense based on lot size and minimum square footage and a brick exterior versus a vinyl exterior, then those expenses are going to be the same in either location. So my contention would be that if we don't allow those mandates to occur locally, we give the market an opportunity to provide some of those housing options that need to be there.
Okay, and last question from Representative Thomas.
Hey, Austin.
Hey.
Since you called me out, I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question now.
Please.
So one of the things as a home builder, your job is to turn a profit, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so in order to turn a profit, you're going to try to build as much as you can for as cheap as you can to turn the biggest profit that you can. Am I right or wrong in that statement?
I think that's a reduction of the issue. I think home builders in Georgia want to be here for the duration, and to take an approach like that would develop a bad reputation, which I think would be easily identifiable in the market.
So would you say that it's fair that when you can maximize density, that would be something that would interest you, because obviously you can build more for the same amount of land for less? Is that right?
I think a maximizing of density would be appropriate to the location, to the public services available there. And, you know, I don't see a whole lot of our members scrambling to maximize density in inappropriate locations.
So when you factor in your density and you figure out what's going to work best, do you take into account the any of the growth plans for the county with regards to roads and any other future infrastructure that might be needed when you decide how many houses are going to be on. Say for right now it's zoned R40, but now the county's been taken out of that ability. You decide you want to come in and put a house every quarter acre. I mean, who in your organization or who in that association is going to come back and say, okay, well, we have to do some things that make sense so the county can keep up with what it is we're doing? I mean, do you have anybody that does that?
And so I think those conversations would continue to happen locally between the developers and the city planning staff.
But if they're preempted from being able to say, hey, you know, we don't want that, that doesn't work for us. If they don't have that ability, what card do they have in that case? It's just something to think about. It's definitely a concern of mine. So thank you. And I appreciate all you do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. No more questions. And Representative Washburn, did you want to make some final comments?
I would like to, Mr. Chairman, but I will try to keep it brief. But I do appreciate the chance to stand and clarify on a couple of issues here. There's been a lot said today, a lot of attacks made on this bill. And first of all, relative to my friends at GMA and ACCG, the esteemed mayor of Tifton talked about how they could come to the table with a lot of good input and a lot of good ideas to do better than what we have done with 517. Well, here are the facts. They came to every study committee. They were in the audience. They had 4 months to come and make some suggestions. When the session started, I invited them to come to my office. Mr. Thornton and an associate, and Mr. Mueller and an associate came to my office. We met for an hour and a half. We didn't agree on everything, but we talked a long time. And the facts are, they told me they had had a day-long meeting where they had done a lot of work on this issue. And they promised me they would get it to me very soon. I kept asking, where's the document? Where are your suggestions? We're ready to work on the bill. They kept saying, it's coming, it's coming. Now, we're talking about two very large organizations here, GMA and ACCG, with many, many people on staff. I believe they could have produced some of those concrete suggestions in this last 4 months, but they did not. They gave us, finally, when I kept asking, they finally, just a few days ago, and truthfully, I thought they were doing everything they could to slow us down on producing any legislation. Finally, a few days ago, they didn't bother to send it to me. I got a phone call that they were going to send it to leadership instead, and so they did. Well, the majority leader called me in and expressed some concerns about how that operation had been done, but here's the facts. That document they gave me is nothing but a bunch of bureaucratic mumbo-jumbo about creating statewide housing zones and giving them more power and giving more state money to help with the problem. That's all the input they have given so far, and so, Madam Mayor, for your information, they've had months to produce something, and they didn't bother to do it. So now, what are we hearing from? We're hearing from a bunch of bureaucrats that scream, home rule, at any suggestion that they're not doing the job and that we need some help here with this housing crisis. So they've had their chance, and they hadn't produced anything. And all they want to do now is delay anybody at the state taking action to do something about this issue. Secondly, there is nothing in either one of these bills about establishing any kind of statewide zoning. And the esteemed commissioner from Forsyth County kept saying, we're trying to take over zoning. This has nothing to do with zoning. It has to do with design mandates and telling people how they have to build a home that they've been on a lot where they've been paying taxes. That's what this is about. This is never suggesting you should not build according to the building code. It is about safety. It is about building good, solid houses. And the very idea that somebody would suggest that this bill wouldn't reduce cost, Average construction cost now is $150 a square foot. On a 200 square foot difference, that's $30,000. And anybody that suggests that it doesn't cost more to build a four-sided brick house than it does to build a four-siding wood siding house or vinyl siding house needs to check the prices of brick and siding. This bill is a practical bill designed to reduce housing costs for Georgians. And yes, ma'am, Representative Bernal, it is about workforce housing. But it is also about the little first-time home buyer who would like to buy a home and can't afford to. And often they can't afford to buy one where they'd like to buy because a local city council is telling them, if you build a house in our city, we want you to build it according to our taste. Not what you can afford, but according to our taste. Ladies and gentlemen, I grew up in the building business. My grandfather and my father specialized in first-time home buyer construction. And when I got grown, me and my brothers joined my daddy in business, and we have built many a house for a little first-time home buyer. And I've sat at that table with them and seen the pride in their eyes that they finally had a home that they could go, and through the process of appreciation of the price and the paying down of the mortgage, they could create some financial stability, and they could create some generational wealth. Ladies and gentlemen, our Georgians deserve the opportunity to do that. And they shouldn't have to ask a county commission or a city council anywhere what they can build their house out of according to the building code. Forgive my passion, but I am outraged by the stream of bureaucrats I've seen come up here this afternoon. The last thing is, this is about freedom, and it is about supply. And the housing crisis is because of lack of supply. And if you want to solve the supply, you've got to loosen up some of these requirements so people can build houses for people to buy. And also, I think it's pretty absurd to sit here and say, we shouldn't rein this stuff in, because even if they do, first of all, claiming we can't reduce cost, which is not true. We can reduce cost. And if we do, if you let some houses be built, the free market will take over, and competition will exist, and prices will come down. This is all about supply. It is about supply, and it is about freedom. And it is about the right of Georgians to be able to buy a home if they want to. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud of this legislation. We worked very hard on it. And oh, by the way, I guess I did make a mistake to talk about color. I will give them that. The color of the house won't reduce the cost. But it's an idea of freedom. If you want a lot and you want to build a house, you ought to be able to paint it whatever color you want to without having to go before some 5-member panel that's going to tell you what they want you to do with it. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for hearing this bill, and thank you for your patience. It's been a long afternoon. I'm honored to serve with every one of you in the Georgia House, and I'm honored to work on this important issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Bernal?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've been on governmental affairs since I came into the legislature. And governmental affairs handles a lot of very sensitive issues. However, we should never call out the people who speak to us and
we're
go
supposed to
point,
just
with-
not
point
defend
at
our
one
position?
person. We should not do that. We should be respectful of everybody that comes in here to speak to us. We can have a different opinion, but we should not be disrespectful.
Well, I take your criticism with the method that it was intended, but frankly, I think for us to have to sit here and listen to what we perceive to be untrue statements, we should have the right to defend them. And I had to point out who had made those statements, and to point out the failure of ACCG and GMA to do what they claim they want to do.
But in the House, we're not allowed to call out people. I'm just following the rules.
Well, we'll compare notes on that.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. We are doing hearing only on this bill today. The bill will be eligible to be called up in committee tomorrow or in subsequent full committee meetings for a vote. Encourage you to review the bill, and if there's anything you wish to do different other than what's been presented, come forward with a substitute. Anyone on the committee have any other comments before we adjourn?